Welcome back, guys. We're back with another interesting story which is on What If Bella Chose Alaska Over Forks? Before starting, don't forget to like and subscribe for more such videos. Whoa, let's get started. After Mom married Phil, I could see how much she missed him when he was away. I had never been in love, so I didn't fully understand that kind of longing, but it was interesting to observe. She had matured a bit when she met him, and he seemed to bring out the best in her. Renee was a better person because of Phil. I had to admit that. She was still a scatterbrain and somewhat flaky, but she had a new sense of peace and confidence that she carried. Except, when he was away, traveling, she acted like part of her soul was missing. She was miserable. Because of this, I made a decision. I was going to gain my independence a little earlier than I originally imagined. At the beginning of my junior year of high school, I met with my guidance counselor and designed a plan to take community college classes at night in addition to my high school AP classes during the day. These courses would satisfy high school graduation requirements and I would be able to graduate by the end of the year. At first, Renee balked. She believed I could handle the work, but she wanted me to experience the supposed magical senior year of high school with football games, spring break trips and prom and all the other traditions. Did she know me at all? I was never into that kind of stuff. I wasn't antisocial at school, but I was studious, preferring to read at home on a Friday night than go to the mall with my friends. I definitely wasn't extroverted and I would not miss senior year at all. "Oh, Bella, you're 17 going on 30 inches," Renee sighed, as she signed the consent forms. I quickly dismissed the resentment I suddenly felt upon hearing her words. She was right, I was more mature than most girls my age. But Renee was part of the reason I had to grow up so quickly. I was the one who had to take care of her, as well as myself. I couldn't admit that out loud, though, even if she was well aware of it. It would have been stating the obvious. And, really, although I may have felt a little resentment about the reversal of our roles, I didn't regret the way things were turning out. I sincerely did not care if I had a senior year of high school. I was actually looking forward to being on my own, not responsible for anyone but myself. "You could always go live with your father, in Forks, if you want to get away from Phoenix," Renee told me, as she handed me the forms. For a person who was easily distracted, she was also incredibly perceptive. "Forks?" I replied, with exaggerated disgust. "It's cold and wet and no thank you." Renee smiled. "Good. I would miss you, anyway," she responded sincerely, standing up to give me a hug, then walked to the house phone to call Phil. I actually had considered living with Charlie as an option. We weren't close, but he was still my father. I loved him. Our personalities were more similar than me and Renee. We were both quiet, not needing to talk, rarely complaining, suffer in silence kind of people. I saw him during major holidays and for a couple of weeks of vacation during the summer. Living with him wouldn't be so bad, but I honestly could not see myself in Forks. Although I was exaggerating for Renee's benefit, it really was cold and wet, and if I was going to be miserable, I'd rather be miserable in a place with sunshine. Was I miserable? No, but I suspected I would be in Forks. That's why I decided to go the graduate early route. It was only a year, and at the end of it, I would go off to college, giving Renee freedom to be with Phil and giving myself freedom to be on my own. It was an incredibly busy year. My daily schedule was from 7 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. I was at high school. From 2:30 p.m. 5 p.m. I was at the library doing homework. 5 p.m. 6 p.m. I went home to make and eat dinner with Renee. Then from 6:30 p.m. 9 p.m. I was at the community college taking classes. On the weekends I slept and did more homework. I barely saw Renee, and she even occasionally left me on my own a few times a month, to go visit Phil. It was a challenge to balance my time, but academically I was handling myself very well. I was surprised that I was capable of handling such a rigorous workload. When graduation day arrived, Charlie came down from Forks and Phil came off the road, and Renee was beaming with excitement, proud of me for graduating a year early. After the ceremony, we went out to dinner and I took the moment to announce my plans for college, when Charlie brought up the subject. "So, Bells, are you finally going to relax? You've worked so hard," Charlie asked, his tone betraying that he didn't fully understand why I rushed to finish high school. I never explained my reasons for wanting to graduate early, although it seemed pretty obvious to me. "I'll be in Jacksonville this summer. You and your mom could join me," Phil suggested. "You could go to the beach, meet some kids your age." Renee's eyes lit up at the idea and she looked at me expectantly. Or you could spend the summer with me in Forks, Charlie added, his eyes hopeful. It was kind of cute that my parents were competing to spend time with me, but I had already made up my mind. Well, I've actually decided to start school early. Bella. Renee interrupted with a shriek. You're becoming a workaholic. You need to take a break, have some fun. You're only young once. I didn't respond immediately, thinking of how Renee continued to have fun throughout her adult years and probably acted younger than I did. Fun was overrated, anyway. Charlie noticed my reaction and tried to ease the awkwardness. Where have you decided to go? He asked. Good question, but I knew my answer wouldn't calm Renee down. The University of Alaska at Fairbanks, I answered quietly. Charlie, Renee and even Phil's mouths dropped open in shock. Alaska was the last place they expected me to go to college. I already knew their main objections before they said it themselves. A, it was very far away, and B, it was cold in Alaska and I hated the cold. It's a dry cold, not a moist cold, like in Forks, I spoke before they could protest. And the summers are warm with daylight almost 24 hours a day. Renee didn't shriek, but she was obviously confused and surprised. Bella, Alaska? Really? It was an odd choice, I couldn't disagree with that. When I started to apply to college, months earlier, in my bedroom, I had a map of the United States. With a gold star, I marked all the locations that interested me. My entire life I'd lived in Arizona. I'd never traveled, except to California for vacation, Washington when I was child visiting Charlie, and to New Mexico for adventures with Renee. I wanted something different. So, I applied to random schools on the East Coast and in the Southeast and Alaska. It was somewhat of a joke, really, but I also felt compelled to do it. When the acceptance letters and scholarship offers arrived, I had many options to choose from. I thought long and hard about it, and Alaska kept coming to the forefront of my mind. It haunted me. I even had dreams about it. Although it didn't make sense, I knew it was where I was supposed to be. But I couldn't convince my parents that I was going to this school because I had a gut feeling about it. I was given a full academic scholarship, including room and board, I responded. The incredulity didn't leave their faces. They knew I was probably offered full scholarships to many schools. I shrugged. If I don't like it, I can always transfer. When are you leaving? Charlie asked. In a couple of weeks. They have an early enrollment summer program. It's a requirement for my scholarship. Requirement wasn't exactly true. It was optional, but I had no reason to remain in Phoenix. Renee sighed. You're only 17, she murmured. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. A year ago she was saying I was 17 going on 30. Now I was too young to go to college? I'll be 18 in September, I reminded her. Renee nodded, but she and Charlie both looked worried for me. I appreciated their concern, but felt it was a little late. Most parents were actively involved in helping their teenager choose where to go to college. I hadn't exactly hid the process from Renee and Charlie. On the phone with Charlie, whenever I tried to bring it up, he always told me he trusted my decision and that I had a good head on my shoulders. When I tried to show Renee different college brochures, she would look at them for a second, then become distracted by something more important. So, no, I wasn't going to feel guilty for making my own decision about my future. I would be the one to live with the consequences, anyway, not them. Our girl is growing up so fast, Phil remarked, winking at me. He wasn't as worried about me as my parents, obviously, since he wasn't as emotionally invested as a new, often absent, stepfather. But he wasn't a bad guy, either. We can visit her at Christmas, Renee, or she can visit us in Florida. My mother's face lit up. Whether it was from the suggestion of visiting me or the reminder she would be moving to Florida, I didn't know. I'm proud of you, Bells. I know you'll be very successful at whatever you decide to do with your life, Charlie encouraged. Thanks, Dad, I replied with a smile. 2 weeks after graduation from high school, I arrived in Fairbanks. Despite my fierce independence, moving to a new state, one that was the complete opposite of the desert terrain of Arizona, was daunting. Alaska was breathtakingly beautiful, but it was very isolated. I didn't know a single person. Had I made the right decision? These worries only lasted for a moment. I quickly pushed them out of my head. The decision had been made. I was sticking with it. I would miss the warmth of Arizona, and I would miss Renee, but I had the satisfaction in knowing that I was taking control of my life, making my own decisions. My new independence more than made up for whatever familiar comforts I had lost. Orientation passed and classes began. The workload felt easy compared to what I was taking previously. Some of my credits had transferred, so I was immediately able to take courses in my major English. I was sincerely interested in learning and I made a couple of casual friendships with girls in my dorm. Life was good. I even enjoyed living in weather in the summer was warm sometimes hot and it was light almost 24 hours a day. When winter arrived, there were 7 long months of dark and cold. But, I surprisingly didn't mind it that much. I loved viewing the northern lights and the way the moon reflected off the snow. Renee and Phil visited the first Christmas, but never returned. I stopped going on vacation with Charlie in the summer. It felt rather childish, but I remained in touch with both my parents through phone calls and emails. Renee always offered to fly me to Florida for a visit, but I objected that it was too expensive and she didn't try to overrule me. I missed my parents, but I was living my own life now. After my freshman year, I rented a small cabin, close to public transportation and campus. It was a dry cabin, meaning that it had no plumbing, and that I had to go into town to get water, and use an outhouse as a bathroom. I imagined it was rather romantic to live in a cabin in the woods in Alaska. Young women, such as myself, rarely chose to live this way, but I wasn't high maintenance and didn't mind the inconvenience. When I arrived in Fairbanks, I began writing and knew I wouldn't seriously be able to continue this discipline if I lived amongst the distractions of dormitory life. My workaholic tendencies didn't cease. I took the maximum number of classes allowed, worked part-time at a bookstore in town, and during the evenings and weekends spent all my free time writing. I had a few friends, but otherwise I was alone. I liked the solitude, but sometimes I did worry about myself. Maybe I was too isolated, too content with myself. I never connected well with people, with my clumsiness and innate shyness, but this fierce independence sometimes felt too independent. Shouldn't I share my life with someone? I wasn't lonely, but sometimes it felt like something or someone was missing. Whenever these thoughts threatened to overwhelm me, I pushed them out of my head and focused on being busy. I was good at doing this. Before I knew it, 2 years passed, and I was experiencing a senior year for the first time in college. Due to transfer credits from community college, going to school full-time, even in the summers, and taking the maximum number of courses each semester, I only had a few credits left to complete graduation requirements. I was taking an American Renaissance class 3 mornings a week and had an independent study project for advanced creative writing. After a long discussion with my professor, and his approval after reading some of my writing, I was able to use the novel I had been working on for the last 2 years as my project. It gave me the motivation to finish it and was an easy 6 credits to earn towards my degree. I would have a Bachelor of Arts degree in English by May. I hadn't meant to graduate from college in 3 years, but I was proud of myself for being so focused. It was a quiet life in Alaska, but I was content. Mornings at school, afternoons and evenings at the bookstore, nights at home writing. This became my routine as my 20th birthday passed and I began my last winter in Alaska. Is it really my last winter here? I thought, as I walked into Gulliver's Books late one morning after class. I didn't have any plans after graduation. Although I seemed to rush through high school and even college, I didn't feel the need to rush away from Fairbanks. It had become home for me. Maybe I would apply for graduate school. Dave would probably allow me to keep working at the store. Maybe I could work and use my free time to continue writing. Writing was what truly made me happy, other than reading, of course. I'm such a nerd, I chuckled to myself, taking off my coat and wiping my boots on the mat. When I moved to Fairbanks, I began working part-time at Gulliver's Books, and as my academic load lightened, I transitioned to working full-time hours. It was a small bookshop, but the staff was a tight-knit group. Dave, the owner, Maria the general manager, Annie the office clerk and Sarah the cafe manager had become like family to me. They were all older, in their late 40s to mid-50s, and had taken me under their wing when I first arrived in town. I spent a lot of time in the store during my first summer, sitting in the cafe and writing for hours in my journal, or memorizing the stacks of shelves. Eventually Dave offered me a job. Since you spend so much time here, anyway, he explained. My coworkers respected my privacy, and I knew if I needed anything they would be there for me. What are you laughing at? Dave asked, as I walked over to the counter to put on my name tag. I shrugged and smiled. Just thinking about how weird I am, more happy to read or write than talk to people. You're not weird, Bella, Dave admonished. Most people talk too much anyway. You don't ramble on like others do. Like me? Sarah called out, walking down the stairs from the cafe on the second floor. She smiled kindly. "Bella, today's lunch is vegetable soup and turkey panini. Come get it whenever you're hungry." "Thanks, Sarah," I replied. They always made sure I ate lunch at work because they knew I often forgot to eat when I was doing schoolwork or writing. "Good morning, Bella." Maria greeted me warmly, walking in from the back office. "How are you?" "I'm good," I responded politely. "How are you?" "Oh, experiencing the usual aches and pains of old age. I picked up a new shipment of books this morning at the post office and I think I pulled a muscle." She rubbed her lower back. "I'm sorry. Can I do anything to help?" I asked. She shook her head. "Dave was my hero. He brought all the boxes inside. Annie has scanned them all into the system, but I do need you to shelve them. When you're finished, check back in with me, okay?" I smiled. "Sure, no problem." Shelving books was tedious work, but she let me listen to music while I worked. Tourist season was over and only locals would be visiting. Should be an easy day, I thought to myself. As I walked to the back office to grab the cart of new books by Annie's desk, I looked back and saw Maria and Dave whispering to one another. Although they weren't married or even officially dating, everyone knew how in love they were with one another. It was cute. I put headphones in my ears, choosing to listen to one of Renee's favorite classical pieces, and wondered, for a brief second, whether I would ever fall in love or not. Probably not, I smiled wryly. I wasn't even sure if I was capable of loving someone in that way. Definitely not. I was too independent. The hours whiled away as I organized books and placed them on the correct shelves. Occasionally, I would pause to read the back cover of a book, if it looked interesting, but mostly I worked. It was until I felt my stomach rumble that I realized I had forgotten about lunch. It was time to take a break. I took off my headphones and tucked them in my pocket, stretching my muscles, which were a bit stiff after hours of intense concentration. I closed my eyes and yawned. When I opened my eyes, I noticed a man staring at me intently. In that brief second, when our eyes met, it was as if time stood still. A shiver went down my spine and I blushed. Embarrassed, I looked down, covering my face with my hair, and turned to walk in the opposite direction. As I made my way through the back office, taking the back staircase to the second-floor cafe, I groaned. It had been too long since I had seen an attractive man. I didn't know how to react. I should have smiled, asked him if he needed help. Instead, I fled. "So mature, Bella," I muttered to myself, rolling my eyes. I stumbled through the kitchen. "Sarah, I forgot to eat lunch. I'm sorry," I apologized. "Do you have anything left?" "For you, of course. Relax for a minute and I'll bring it out to you." "Thanks, you're the best," I replied with relief. My stomach was filled with butterflies and I was nervous and jittery. Was the man still downstairs in the bookstore? Did he think I was a complete moron? I tried to calm down, pouring a glass of lemonade and finding a seat at a table in the back corner of the cafe. Once seated, I put my arms on the table and lowered my head to rest on them. How could one look get me so flustered? I definitely needed to get out more. This was ridiculous. No man had ever had this affect on me before. Suddenly, I felt the presence of someone standing beside me. At first I thought it was Sarah, bringing me my food, but she couldn't have been that quick. Whoever it was smelled really, really good, intoxicating sweet, and the butterflies in my stomach doubled. Could it be the man I saw downstairs? Slowly, I sat up, gathering the courage to raise my eyes. My heart was pounding. I was almost trembling, but it wasn't out of fear or anxiety. I was having a physical reaction to this person standing near me. When I looked up, I saw that it was him and I almost forgot to breathe. Gorgeous wouldn't begin to describe his godlike beauty. Dark eyes, bronze-colored hair, perfect cheekbones, lips that begged to be kissed. He was looking at me intently, as if he was surprised at what he saw. In fact, he was almost smiling and that made me even more unnerved. "Bella," he whispered. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. His eyes seemed to be memorizing my face. I swallowed, nervously. "Do I know you?" I asked. There was no way I would ever forget meeting this guy, but it was the only thing I could think to say. He shook his head softly and glanced down at my name tag. Duh, I thought, wanting to hide. I blushed again and he smiled fully this time. I waited for him to say something. I didn't know if my mouth could form any coherent sentences. Our eyes locked and this time I wasn't able to break away. Instead of feeling flustered, I felt transformed as if nothing would ever be the same again. The butterflies in my stomach remained, but they were joined by a sense of completeness. It was as if I had been searching for this man my entire life, and now that I had found him, I was whole. I felt relief. I fainted. Darkness covered me as I collapsed. When I awoke, I was surrounded by Sarah and a few cafe patrons, but the man was gone. Where did he go? I yelped in panic. Who, dear? Sarah asked. I was shaking and felt a bit dizzy. No one. What happened? It looks like you fainted. You can't keep forgetting to eat, Bella, she answered with kindness, but also a gentle rebuke. I groaned. I'm so embarrassed. Thank you everyone, for helping me, I mumbled, standing up, but almost instantly lost my step. Sarah looked genuinely concerned. Maybe you should see a doctor? She suggested. No, I'm fine, I shook my head, but maybe I do need to go home. It wasn't like me to take off from work early, but I suddenly felt completely exhausted, as if all energy had been drained from my body when this stranger locked eyes with me. I had no idea what just happened to me, and I needed to figure it out. I needed to be alone. Yes, I'll help you downstairs, Sarah replied, agreeing with me. She walked me to the door, explaining to Dave what happened. He insisted on driving me home, and Maria helped me put on my coat. It was uncomfortable to have them fawning over me, but I was too tired to protest. Bella, get some rest, Maria encouraged. We'll see you Monday. It was Friday. I wasn't scheduled to work Saturday and Sunday. We were closed. I nodded my head. Thanks, Maria. Dave drove me home in his truck and then made sure my water tanks were full and I had enough firewood. I was starting to be more embarrassed. My fainting must have really scared them. It kind of scared me, too, I guess. I'll be fine, Dave, I insisted. Thank you so much for your help. Call us if you need anything, he offered with a wave as he walked to his truck. I closed the door and locked it, walked to my bedroom, still wearing my coat, scarf and gloves, and laid on the bed, almost immediately falling asleep. I dreamed of the man in the bookstore, the bronze-haired god with dark eyes. We were holding hands and running through a meadow. I love you, Bella, he whispered. We will never be apart. He pulled me into his arms, and as I looked into his eyes, I realized I never truly existed until I met him. I thought I would melt away by being loved so deeply. Suddenly, anxiety overcame me and I woke up gasping. Shaking, I steadied my breathing to calm down. I screamed when I realized I was wearing a nightgown, instead of my clothes, and I was tucked under the sheets, instead of sprawled out on top of them, stealing wearing my coat, scarf and gloves. I didn't remember changing or moving at all. Calm the fuck down, Bella, I muttered to myself. I rarely swore, but it seemed to be appropriate language since I was seriously losing my mind. It was dark outside, but it was always dark during Alaskan winters. I glanced at my bedside clock. It was 5 a.m. I had slept more than 15 hours. Yikes. Maybe I really was sick. I noticed it was warm in the cabin and that alarmed me. It should be cold. I glanced and noticed the space heater in my bedroom wasn't plugged into the socket. Scrambling, putting on my robe and house shoes, I walked cautiously into the living room, to see the glow of a fire in the fireplace. Someone had started a fire. I grabbed an iron poker from the fireplace and held it up defensively. Who the hell is here? I demanded, cautiously walking around the cabin. It was small. There wasn't a lot of hiding places. I will hurt you. My heart beat wildly. Could I really defend myself? I would try. The living room and kitchen shared an open floor plan. I poked under the sofa, opened the closet, looked under my bed. There wasn't a bathroom, but there was a small room I used for showering. It was empty. Although I was gripped with fear, I searched the entire cabin and found no one. There were only a few windows and they were all locked and braced. The intruder would have had to break a window to enter the cabin that way. Obviously, he or she had entered through the locked front door. But it showed no sign of forced entry. Creepy. I moved as much furniture as I could, sofa, chairs, kitchen table, and stacked it against the door, barricading myself to safety. Once it felt secure, I went to the stove to boil myself a cup of tea. The kettle was warm and next to it was a cup and tea bag already prepared. I glanced around suspiciously, completely freaked out. Nevertheless, I poured the hot water into the mug and went to the refrigerator to add cream and sugar. I took my tea and sat down on the rug in front of the fire. Was someone watching me? Was someone trying to kill me? If they were, They were being extremely thoughtful about it, changing me into more comfortable clothes, tucking me into bed, preparing a fire and making tea. Who would do that? I must have done all of this while sleepwalking, I thought to myself. I had seen a documentary about it, people who do things while sleeping. I must have undressed myself, made a fire, then started boiling water before I went back to bed. That made more sense than a stranger breaking into my house to take care of me. I looked at the mountain of furniture against the door and rolled my eyes. Silly, Bella. With the fear subsided, I thought of the man in the bookstore. I didn't even know his name. I didn't know if I would ever see him again. The thought made me feel incredibly sad and tears began streaming down my face. I exclaimed. Seriously, Bella. You need to get it together, you're falling apart. Even though I spent a lot of time alone, I rarely talked to myself. I had an anxiety attack at work and I was sleepwalking, and I was irrationally crying over a stranger. During freshman year orientation, I had been warned about the dangers of living in Alaska. With the constant darkness of winter, many people had seasonal affective disorder. My classmates even joked about people going crazy in Alaska. Maybe I had lived a solitary life for too long. Maybe it was catching up to me and I was having a mental breakdown. The last few years I had worked incredibly hard, without a break. Maybe this was my brain's way of telling me to calm down? Maybe I hallucinated and the man in the bookstore didn't really exist. He was too gorgeous, too perfect. It made more sense for him to be a figment of my imagination than a real human being. I finished my tea, then stretched out on the rug. Monday morning I was going to campus health clinic and asking for a referral to see a psychiatrist. I needed help. A few hours later, when I awoke, I felt refreshed. I laughed at myself for freaking out, but was still seriously going to ask for professional help. I added a couple of logs to the fire and put the furniture back in place, rolling my eyes at how ridiculously I had reacted hours before. I didn't usually wear the nightgown I had on. It was strange that I had chosen it, so I changed into my normal uniform of sweats and a hoodie. I spent the rest of the day at home, doing homework, working on my novel, and watching a movie on television. The stranger from the bookstore invaded my thoughts constantly and I repeatedly told myself he was just a figment of my imagination. He's not real, I thought silently. I spent Sunday much like I did Saturday, except in the afternoon I went to the laundromat, followed by a trip to the grocery store. My hands were full by the time I stumbled off the bus to walk down the lane to my cabin. I always overestimated how much I could carry. I walked slowly, balancing the laundry in a sack on my back as my two hands carried the heavy grocery bags. "Can we help you with that?" a voice asked in the darkness. I screamed in surprise and dropped my bags. "Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you," the voice apologized. I looked and saw that it belonged to a small woman with short black hair. "Hi, I'm Alice," she greeted, sticking out her gloved hand. "This is my brother Emmett." I glanced up at the man. He was huge. I stopped myself from saying, "Whoa," out loud. I had never seen either of them before and I knew everyone who lived in my neighborhood. There wasn't a car in sight, so it seemed like they were walking like me. Hello," I replied, not shaking Alice's hand, but bending down to pick up my bags. "I'm Bella. Are you new in town?" "Please let me help you with that," Emmett offered, taking the bags from me, holding all of them with one hand, as if they weighed nothing. With his other hand, he took the laundry bag off my back. It was so unlike me to allow others to help. I was independent and could do everything on my own, but Alice and Emmett seemed eager to help me. "Thanks," I mumbled, suddenly feeling shy. Alice smiled at Emmett. "Yes, our family just moved here from Forks, Washington." I gasped. "Forks? My father lives in Forks." "Really?" Alice mirrored my gasp, with equal surprise. "He's the chief of police I used to visit as a child, but I haven't been back in years." "Charlie Swan, right?" Emmett asked. "Yes. I never expected to meet someone in Fairbanks who ever heard of Forks, much less lived there and knew my father. I wondered if Emmett knew Charlie because he had arrested. His body looked dangerous, but the smile on his face and glint in his eye made him seem like a lovable teddy bear. "He was a friend of our father. Carlisle, our adopted father, is a doctor and worked at the hospital," Emmett explained. "They were adopted? That was interesting. I'll have to tell Char, my dad, that I met you. What's your last name?" "Cullen," Alice answered, excitement in her eyes. "Please tell Charlie we said hello." "I will," I smiled, suddenly feeling comfortable in Emmett and Alice's presence. Usually, I was awkward when meeting new people, but I felt like I had known them my entire life even though it had only been a few minutes. "We were just going for a walk," Emmett explained. "Can we walk you to your cabin?" Suddenly, I was suspicious. "How do you know I live in a cabin?" Alice shrugged. "There are only cabins on this street. They're really cute, but goodness they look small." I blushed, feeling stupid for being suspicious. One minute I trusted them, the next second I was on edge. "Sorry, I haven't been feeling well. Thanks for the help, I do appreciate it. My cabin is just down the way." Both Alice and Emmett looked concerned. "Are you sick, Bella?" Alice asked. "We could take you to see Carlisle. He's a great doctor." I shook my head and started to lead them down the lane. "No, I'm fine. I actually was already planning to go to the health clinic tomorrow." Alice and Emmett continued to look worried, and for a second I almost thought Alice was sniffing, trying to smell me. "I'm a student at UAF, although I'll be graduating soon. If you have any questions or want a tour around campus, I'd be happy to help," I offered, wanting to distract the attention away from me, and assuming they were college students. They looked too mature to be in high school and too elegant to be seasonal workers. Alice clapped her hands, as if my offer was the most exciting thing she had ever heard. "We would love a tour, wouldn't we, Emmett?" He nodded. "Rosalie, Jasper and Edward would love it, too." "Wow, you have a big family," I remarked, taking out my key as we neared the cabin. "I'm an only child." "We're very close," Alice replied. "I can't wait for you to meet them." I smiled tentatively, as I reached out to Emmett for my bags. Alice was speaking to me as if we were already close friends. I didn't mind her familiarity, but it was kind of weird. "What's your phone number?" Alice demanded, pulling out her cell phone. They were strangers, but I didn't feel threatened by them. After all, they already knew where I lived and seemed to know Charlie. I didn't have to exhaust myself walking home with so much to carry, and it was nice to talk to people my age for once. Maybe Alice and Emmett would be my new friends. I gave her my number and she entered it into her phone. "I'm sending you a text message, so you have my number. I'll call you soon." "Thanks for helping me. It was really nice to meet you," I spoke sincerely. "It was nice to meet you, Bella," Emmett replied. "Let's go, Alice. I'm sure Mom and Dad are waiting for us." Alice threw her arms around me and gave me a hug. "Bella, we're going to be such good friends," she exclaimed. I didn't know how to respond, and Emmett laughed. "Excuse my sister, she comes on too strong sometimes." "It's okay." I gave a small smile and waved as they walked away. "Bye." "Bye, Bella. See you soon," Alice almost sang. She skipped off into the darkness, Emmett following her. Emmett was right. Alice did push her friendship on me a little strongly, but it felt completely sincere. It felt nice that someone was excited to be my friend, even though I wasn't sure what the motivation was. Maybe she was lonely, like me? Was I lonely? I never allowed myself to think about it, but Alice's offer of friendship made me realize how much time I spent alone. Being alone didn't necessarily equal loneliness, but when was the last time I had done something other than work? I couldn't remember. Monday morning I called Maria and told her that I was going to see a doctor after class and that I would be late to work. She was happy that I was getting my sickness checked out and told me to come in whenever I could. I didn't mention that I wasn't going to a physician kind of doctor. I was going to a psychiatrist kind of doctor. It would be too embarrassing and she would ask too many questions. My private life was private. Class went by quickly and I immediately walked across campus, making my way to the student health clinic. Even though I lived in Fairbanks for more than 2 years, it was still peculiar to me for it to be dark in the middle of the day. But that was Alaskan winter. I looked out at the horizon, thinking that somewhere the sun was shining, just not here. Since I wasn't paying attention, I slipped on an icy patch and began to tumble backwards, only to be caught by 2 strong arms. "Thank you," I gasped. "I'm so clumsy." I turned around to see who had steadied me. The person's hands remained holding my arms. It was him. The stranger from the bookstore. He smiled hesitantly, as my eyes widened in shock. My eyes rolled back and I felt darkness covering me. I fainted. Again. I was no longer outside in the cold. I was sitting on someone's lap and he was holding me in his arms. I didn't want to open my eyes. I was going to die of embarrassment. "Bella?" The stranger's voice asked softly. "Are you awake?" Damn. How did he know? I opened my eyes and his face was only inches from mine. My heart started to beat wildly. I felt an impulsive urge to kiss this stranger. I had never been kissed before, but suddenly I couldn't think of a rational reason why our lips should not be pressed together. I mumbled, shaking my head. Snap out of it, Bella. The stranger still had his arms around me and I didn't want to leave his embrace, but when I realized we were sitting in the middle of the student center, the positioning didn't seem so appropriate. He was a stranger, after all. I stumbled out of his lap, and almost fell face first on the floor, before he steadied me to sit next to him. Our bodies still touched, sitting side by side. He took my hand into his. You're still dizzy. Perhaps you should see a doctor. I shivered at the sound of his voice. It felt like he was caressing my soul when he talked. Damn it, since when did I think like this? I berated myself, finally snapping out of my haze. So, the stranger was real. Maybe I didn't need to see a psychiatrist after all. I didn't need to see a physician either. I never fainted in my entire life, but I fainted twice both times when I saw this stranger. Definitely connected. Why did he have this affect on me? It was so embarrassing. I'm fine. Thank you for your help. You're welcome. We sat in silence, not looking at each other directly. Sitting side by side, it felt like electricity sparking between us where our bodies touched. Neither of us moved. Eventually, the stranger was the first to speak. My name is Edward Cullen. The stranger had a name. Edward Cullen, where had I heard that name before? Cullen? Are you? I turned to face him and he mirrored my actions. Yes, Emmett and Alice are my brother and sister. They told me they met you yesterday. How did he know I was Bella Swan? My name tag at the bookstore said my first name, but not my last. Surely there was more than one Bella in Fairbanks. Seeing the suspicion in my eyes, Edward answered my question before I had to ask it. I went to the bookstore Saturday, hoping to see you again. When you weren't there, I asked around until someone told me your last name. I wanted to look up your phone number so I could call you, but you were unlisted. When Alice and Emmett returned home Sunday, they told me they met Charlie Swan's daughter, Bella. Why would you want to call me? I asked, shyly. Edward looked surprised. You fainted at the cafe. I wanted to check and see how you were doing. But you left. Why didn't you wait until I woke up? Would have been easier. I'm sorry, I had to talk to someone. Please forgive me. He held my hand and squeezed it gently, looking deeply into my eyes. It won't happen again. I shivered. I was seriously going to faint for a third time if Edward was going to keep looking at me this way. Although it pained me to do so, I withdrew my hand from his and stood up. Well, I'm fine, I managed to squeak out awkwardly. I need to be going now, goodbye. I grabbed my backpack off the floor and began to walk away. Where are you going? Edward asked, chasing after me. I have to go to work, I answered, avoiding his eyes. Can I give you a ride? Despite the fact my body screamed for him to touch me, he was still a stranger and I was the daughter of a police officer. Sorry, I don't accept rides from strangers, I answered politely. I'm a stranger? He replied, hurt evident in his tone of voice. I stopped walking, surprised that he was so hurt by my words. I smiled, trying to soften his pain. Edward, I just met you, I explained. He seemed happy to be looking into my eyes again. I understand. Can I walk with you? He looked so hopeful, I couldn't refuse him. It's a free country, I replied lamely. Was I in 6th grade again? Edward laughed, as if I intentionally was trying to tell a joke. Was he mocking me? I expected Edward to talk to me as we walked, but he didn't. I noticed that he stood as near to me as he could, without touching me. I was tempted to, accidentally, bump into him, but I restrained myself. I didn't understand the yearning I felt to touch him. Gulliver's was right off campus and it didn't take very long to reach it. See you later, I mumbled, with an awkward wave, as I entered the store. To my surprise, Edward followed me inside. I ignored him and took off my coat, hanging it up and putting on my name tag. The store was empty and I went to the back to let Maria know I arrived. She asked about my health, but then remarked I looked so much better than on Friday. I shrugged and asked her what she wanted me to do today. I was assigned to skim the aisles and straighten the books, then man the cash register. Usually Dave liked to be up front to talk with customers, but he was on a trip to Anchorage. Maria looked a little sad, as if she missed him already. Even though it was cute, I wanted to roll my eyes. She reminded me of Renee and Phil. Love sick. I was still very aware of Edward's presence in the store, but acted like I didn't notice him. I wanted to have some self-respect. So far, he must think I'm the girl who faints at his feet every time she looks at him. A man like Edward must have hundreds of girls vying for his attention. I wasn't going to follow the crowd. I did my own thing. I was independent. What are you doing? A voice interrupted my thoughts. Edward. Working, I replied, stating the obvious. I continued to walk down the aisles, scanning the racks to see if any books were out of place. Can I help? He asked. I stopped and turned around to face him. What are you doing? I asked, straightforwardly. I wasn't used to getting this much attention from anyone, especially someone as godlike as Edward. Edward was surprised, as if I should know exactly what he was doing. He looked down, and then directly into my eyes. I just want to be near you, he replied, his face full of vulnerability. My heart rate increased. Butterflies fluttered in my stomach. Edward leaned in closer to me, our foreheads almost touching. I don't want to be a stranger, he whispered, using the word I used earlier to describe him. I was dangerously close to fainting again or ravishing him with kisses. He pulled back, was suddenly 6 feet away, with a book in his hand. How did he move so fast? Bella, I'm going run a few errands, Maria called out, turning into the aisle where I was standing. Annie's in the back and Sarah is upstairs if you needed anything. Okay, hun. I blinked. Okay. Thanks. She looked at me cautiously, then seemed to dismiss her thoughts. Be back soon. By the time I heard the ring of the bell, signaling her exit from the store, Edward was in front of me again, leaning in. I jumped back in shock. Whoa, I yelped. How did you move so fast? Edward's eyes widened. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to frighten you. It's okay, I mumbled, reminding myself to breathe. I could not faint again. The bell at the door rang, signaling new customers entering the store. I went to the front to greet them, resisting the urge to look back at Edward. What was happening between us? What did he mean when he said he didn't want us to be strangers? Was he hitting on me? Impossible? As the morning progressed, Edward didn't try to talk to me again, but he didn't leave, either. He sat in one of the overstuffed chairs and read a book. At one point, it looked like he was texting someone and I felt irrationally jealous, wondering who it could be. Of course, I was watching him when I had a free moment and thought he wasn't looking. It was hard to take my eyes off him, actually. He didn't seem to be watching me, though, and I felt a bit disappointed by that and relieved at the same time. When it was time for my break, I took the back staircase to the cafe to eat my free for employees meal. I chose a garden salad and iced tea. My stomach was still too anxious for anything heavier, and went to my favorite seat in the back corner. On the way there, I picked up the local paper from the front counter and began to look through it while I ate. I wasn't reading it. I was trying to look busy, as I wondered if Edward was still downstairs. May I join you? A voice asked. Edward. Always Edward, interrupting my thoughts of Edward. I nodded, too nervous to speak, and he sat down across from me. How do you like Fairbanks? We asked each other at exactly the same time. We both laughed. Sorry, you first, I insisted. I'm happy to be here, he answered simply. And you? I really like it here. It's so different from where I grew up, but it suits me. I like the peace and quiet. Where did you grow up? Phoenix. Warm, hot, sunny, desert of a place. Where are you from? I was anxious to know anything and everything about this man. Edward seemed to consider his words before answering. I was born in Chicago. My family just moved here from Forks, but you already know that. I smiled as I nodded, delighted that we had something in common. Such a small world. You know, I considered finishing high school in Forks, but decided to graduate a year early in Phoenix, instead. I think we might have been classmates, if I had chosen to live with my dad. But, we meet here in Fairbanks. How crazy is that? We were destined to meet, Edward replied with confidence. I blushed and immediately felt hot and bothered. No man had ever affected me this way. Please eat, he urged, pointing to my plate. Even if it's just a salad, you need your strength. I like salad, I replied, kind of offended that he was picking on my choice of food. I took a big bite and he smiled at me. Aren't you hungry? I asked. He shrugged. I'm fine. So, tell me more about graduating from high school early. Why did you decide to do that? Edward looked at me as if I was the most fascinating person in the world. It was hard not to open up to him. Within minutes, I was telling him my life story. He was so easy to talk to, knowing when to listen and when to ask a clarifying question. Before I realized it, Sarah came over to let us know she was closing the cafe for the day. I jumped up and looked at my watch. I had completely forgotten about work. Edward and I had been talking for 2 hours. It felt like 2 minutes. I have to get back to work, I gasped, picking up my tray and heading towards the kitchen. Not wanting to be rude, I turned back to Edward. It was nice to talk to you, I told him, with all honesty. I was uncertain whether he would want to talk to me again. See you around, I added and disappeared in the back. Sarah followed me into the kitchen. Bella, you just broke that poor guy's heart. You should have seen his face. See you around, she laughed and swatted me with a hand towel. Girl, you play hard to get. I blushed. I'm not trying to play hard to get, I protested. I just spent 2 hours monopolizing the conversation. He was probably relieved that I stopped talking. I've never seen you talk so much, Bella, Sarah observed. Is he an old friend? No, I just met him today, I responded immediately. Her eyes widened. Maybe someone is in love, she said with a smile. I rolled my eyes and groaned. Whatever, I've gotta go, Maria is going to kill me. I bolted down the back staircase, and as soon as I reached the first floor, I felt like I collided into a wall, except it was Edward. What are you? I muttered. His eyes looked troubled. Who is going to kill you? He asked, grabbing me by the shoulders. What? You heard that? His facial expression was deadly serious. I shook my head. Edward, it's a figure of speech. My boss is going to be upset with me. That's all I meant. He calmed down, perhaps realizing how irrational and weird he was being. Please don't talk like that, Edward pleaded. If someone tried to hurt you, he didn't finish his sentence. I was shocked. What had possessed this man? Why was he being so intense about me? Was he for real? Not knowing how to respond, I was thankful that Maria interrupted us, even if it meant getting in trouble. Bella, are you all right? She asked. Who is your friend? Maria didn't seem mad, she seemed curious. In the years she had known me, she had never met any of my friends, mostly because I didn't have many. This is Edward. I was just showing him where I worked. Edward, this is the general manager, Maria. I hated lying to her, but how else could I explain why he was in a space only employees were allowed? It's nice to meet you, Edward greeted, sticking out a hand to shake Maria's. It reminded me of how Alice greeted me, so polite and formal, as if they were from a different era when manners actually mattered. Maria smiled. Nice to meet you, Edward. She glanced at me and her eyes twinkled. Now she had her explanation of who I spent my extended lunch break with. I wasn't in trouble, she was happy for me. She sat down at her desk, returning to her work. Let me show you to the door, Edward, I mumbled, grabbing his arm and leading him out of the office. When I touched him, I felt that electric spark again, but I didn't let go. We stopped walking when we reached the front door of the store. Well, I have to work now, I awkwardly explained. He just stared at me. Why wasn't he asking for my phone number? Because Alice had it. Would she give it to him? Would he call me? Okay, he replied. Okay, I repeated, disappointed he wasn't asking to see me again. Goodbye. I turned and walked to the counter, sitting down on a stool. I looked up and Edward was still standing at the door. Wasn't he going to leave? He walked over to me, a nervous expression on his face. I'm sorry, but I can't say goodbye to you. EPOV. My life was like a moonless night, but it wasn't all bad. There were stars, points of light and reason. My adoptive parents and my brothers and sisters were an encouragement to me. I was lucky to have them in my life. I enjoyed learning new languages and skills. Music was my passion and I spent hours playing the piano. Yet it was still a very dark existence, never changing, always the same. Immortality was a gift in that you were allowed to live forever, but it was also a curse because life could be as boring as hell sometimes. Our family had recently moved to Fairbanks from Forks. Every few decades we took a sabbatical year when we were tired of school and wanted to take a break from the human charade and temptation. Fairbanks was a good fit for us. It was near our Denali cousins, had an abundance of wildlife, and Carlisle could still work in a hospital. The darkness of winter, in addition to the isolation, allowed us to keep an even lower profile than we normally did. We weren't planning on staying here very long. Soon we would move to another small town. I would enroll in high school, again. Then go to college, again. And the process would repeat itself. Maintaining a permanent residence for 6 to 8 years was better than the alternative, a nomadic lifestyle, but the monotonous routine was never ending. Apart from these rare sabbaticals, I expected to live this way for eternity. Such was the life for an immortal, vegetarian vampire. It was yet another day, not much different from any other. Carlyle was at the hospital, Esme was in her study, designing plans for our next house, Rosalie and Emmett were in the garage, Jasper and Alice were researching something on the computer, and I was in my bedroom reading. As I read, I tried to block out the thoughts of my family members, to respect their privacy, especially since the couples were feeling romantic towards one another this morning. I felt the lust rolling off Jasper in waves and Alice's response to him. Rosalie and Emmett were always hot for one another, even after 70 years together. Esme may have been by herself, but Carlyle was always on her mind, even more so when they were apart, and she began to think of him in a rather obscene way. I groaned, shut my book, put on my coat and left the house. Being the only single man in a family of 3 perfectly matched sets of lovers was a challenge. I may not be human, but I was still a man. The lust was affecting me as well, except I had no one to share it with. Instead of torturing myself with experiences I would never have, I took my car and drove into town. Personally, I was always content with myself, never feeling the desire to have a mate of my own. It didn't happen for all vampires. It was unusual that our family mated so quickly and easily. Being alone didn't bother me that much. I accepted it as my destiny in life. To some degree I could satisfy my own physical needs, but I knew it was unlikely I would ever experience the intimacy and obsession that I observed between the couples in my family. Even though I had witnessed Carlyle find his mate in Esme, and Rosalie rescue Emmett from death, and the profound changes that occurred in all of them, in some regard, vampire mating was a mystery to me and I fully expected it to remain that way. But, even if I didn't seek or desire it for myself, I didn't want it thrown in my face, either. I had been meaning to check out the only independent bookstore in town, not expecting to find anything worthwhile, but thought it would perhaps occupy my time until it was safe for me to return home. My stomach churned as I entered the store. The scent hit me like a ton of bricks. It was a human scent and I was surprised that it didn't make my mouth pool with venom. I was definitely attracted to it, but in a way I had never experienced before. Compelled, I followed the scent and it led me to a young woman with long, mahogany hair, listening to music while shelving books, so engrossed with her work she didn't notice me. I stood frozen in shock. Time stood still. The intensity of the connection I felt with this woman was too strong for words to describe. Since I literally could not move, my instincts demanded a plan for survival. Normally, I would choose either fight or flight. But, as I looked at this woman, I didn't want to do either of those things. I only wanted to surrender. In that moment, I knew. This woman was mine. Suddenly it made sense why I never considered being with another woman, human or vampire, even though they were constantly offering themselves to me. I had been waiting for her. The woman stopped working, closed her eyes and yawned. She glanced in my direction and for a brief moment our eyes met. It was instantaneous and immediate. I knew I would love this woman forever. Color filled her cheeks and she covered her face with her hair and then walked away. Why was she walking away from me, instead of towards me? It felt so unnatural. Mine. 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 Where was she going? I followed after her and saw her disappear into a back room, then heard the sound of footsteps on a staircase. She was going to the second-floor cafe. Trying not to draw attention to myself, I went up the public staircase. The woman was sitting at a back table, her head was down and she seemed to be shaking. Was she unwell? I walked slowly, to stand beside her, marveling at the precious gift of her existence, wondering how I ever managed to live a day without her. She raised her head and looked at me. Did she feel our connection as well? What was she thinking? I realized I couldn't read her thoughts. How odd. Her name tag revealed her name and I spoke it out loud. Bella, I whispered, cherishing the name of the person my entire world now revolved around. It was as if she was completely familiar to me. I knew her body and soul. Do I know you? She asked. Did she feel it too? We had never met, but it was as though I had known her forever. I shook my head, not being able to speak because I was overcome with emotion. I read her name tag again, Bella. She blushed and I was unable to contain the joy filling my being, and I smiled. We stared at one another and I knew my life would never be the same again. I was complete. So this is what it feels like, I thought to myself. I observed the devotion Carlyle felt for Esme, as well as the others for their mates, but it seemed fuzzy and inadequate compared to the obsession I now felt for Bella. I wanted to possess her and I wanted her to possess me. My animalistic impulses began to emerge. Physically, I craved her. I needed to touch her. I needed to consume her. I needed to talk to Carlyle. Bella was human. Of course, I knew this from the moment I saw her, but the reality of it set in. She was fragile. I could hurt her. Carlyle would help me understand these new urges and emotions invading my system. Suddenly, Bella's eyes rolled back and she fainted. My first instinct was to protect her, gather her in my arms, escape from the bookstore and claim her as mine. But that would cause too much attention and perhaps frighten Bella. I caught her and placed her on the floor, kissing her forehead. I would stay with her until she recovered. I would stay with her forever. My cell phone buzzed and as I checked it I recognized a text message from Alice. Go to Carlyle now. He's leaving on a hunting trip with Esme and you won't be able to talk to him until next week. She'll be fine. Go now. It felt unnatural to leave Bella, but I absolutely had to talk to Carlyle. I will return, my love, I whispered and then disappeared. As soon as she left my sight, I began to hurt. As vampire, I very rarely ever felt any sort of physical pain. I didn't understand why I was reacting this way. Further proof that I needed to talk to Carlyle. I rushed to the hospital and every passing moment away from Bella's presence, the pain increased. It felt as though my bones were being slowly crushed. As I stumbled into Carlyle's office, he was waiting for me, his thoughts full of concern. Alice called and told me you were coming. What's the matter, son? I managed to smile. I met my mate, Carlyle, I whispered. If I could have cried, I would have. My body was trembling with emotion. Carlyle's face lit up with disbelief and a smile that matched my own. He crossed the room to give me a hug. Congratulations, son. I knew this day would come. I'm so happy for you. He stepped back and sniffed the air. Where is she? Certainly, she must be close by. Why did you come alone? I collapsed in a chair and put my head in my hands. It's complicated. She's a human. Carlyle gasped. A human? Oh, Edward, how does this work? Will I hurt her? Will she love me back? I'm feeling instincts and desires I've never felt before. It's almost too much to bear. Have you spoken with her? He asked. I tried to, but I could only say her name. I was too overwhelmed. Then, she fainted. I grinned, hoping that fainting was a good sign. At least I had some affect on her, even if it was not as strong as the affect she had on me. Carlyle thought for a moment, then began to explain. Mating is mutual. I don't think it makes a difference that she is human. It's a supernatural occurrence. Undoubtedly, she felt the connection as well, but as a human she'll process it differently than our kind do. For you it's instantaneous, for her it might take time to understand what she's feeling. What should I do? I pleaded. He smiled. Introduce yourself, get to know her. Since she's human, it will require more patience on your part, but you've always had amazing self-control. Enjoy this as experience, Edward. It's wonderful. Carlyle made it seem so easy. I had more questions, needed more reassurance, but I needed to return to Bella. It hurts to be away from her, I admitted. He nodded in understanding. It's instinctual to want to be with your mate, especially in the beginning stages when bonding occurs. You must remember how I refused to be separated from Esme, but every couple is different, some are more intense than others. I groaned, a sharp pain shooting through my body unexpectedly. Go to her, son, Carlyle advised, with a smile. Call me if you need anything. I nodded as I stood up and walked towards the door. Carlyle's thoughts were buzzing. He was proud of me, thrilled I had met my match. I cannot wait to meet my new daughter, he thought with delight, as I left his office. Panic overcame me. I was a vampire. Bella was a human. I was immortal, she was not. One day she would die and I could not live without her. Would I change her into one of us? Could I do such a thing? Would she even want to join my world? I could not think of these things now. I was going to listen to my father. I was going to enjoy this experience. I was no longer alone. I immediately returned to the bookstore, rehearsing my introduction on the way there. Hello, I'm Edward Cullen. I love you. Hello, Bella. My name is Edward Cullen. You are mine for eternity. I could recite poetry and then kiss her. I could pretend to need help locating a book and then ask her to marry me. Damn. I had no idea what to say without it ending in a major declaration of feelings and intentions. I was also too intense for my own good. I didn't want to intimidate or overwhelm my mate. And I was nervous. I felt vulnerable. No one else in the world had the power to hurt or reject me like Bella did. How would she react to my love? I entered the bookstore, wiping my feet on the mat and trying very desperately to look nonchalant. My eyes scanned the front desk and shelves. I sniffed the air for her scent, but she was nowhere to be found. I tuned into the thoughts of the humans in the store: Dave, Sarah, Maria, a few customers, and searched for information. They were all worried for Bella. Dave drove her home and had just returned. I focused on Dave's thoughts. He was thinking of how he filled Bella's water tanks and gathered firewood for her. He hoped he had done enough. He was a good man and had nothing but fatherly affection for my Bella. I would reward him later for his kindness. I casually walked by the register, scanning documents, hoping for a glimpse of Bella's last name. I didn't know what it was, but I needed to know. Soon. I feared I would collapse in a faint, just as Bella had done earlier, if I didn't see her immediately, and I needed to find out where she lived. My cell phone buzzed. It was a text message from Alice again. Bella Swan. 237 Gold Hill Road. Thank you, I replied. Her talent, as well as Jasper's computer hacking skills, always got our family the information we needed. Don't be too intense or you'll scare her. I rolled my eyes. I loved my sister, but sometimes she was too bossy. The next text message was directions to Bella's house. Alice may be bossy, but she was also definitely helpful. I drove to Bella's address, but parked my car down the street and walked through the woods instead. I was too nervous to talk. I was just going to observe her, let my emotions settle, then decide what to do from there. It was dark and I would not be detected. There were a few cabins on Bella's street, but they were scattered and far between. Her small cabin was isolated, several yards from the main road. It seemed unusual for a young woman like her to choose to live in such a place so alone and so vulnerable to attack. I gasped. Bella did live alone, right? It never occurred to me that she may have a partner. I repressed a growl. If there was a man in Bella's cabin, he would be destroyed. There would be no competition. She was mine. As I neared, I detected Bella's scent, but there were no lights on in the cabin. Her heartbeat and breathing seemed to indicate she was asleep. She was alone. I waited for an hour, to see if she stirred, but she did not. My pain had been relieved a bit, but I still yearned to see her face. I could easily slip into her house, undetected, and make sure she was safe. Then, I would leave and wait for morning and introduce myself properly. I turned off my phone, as not to be interrupted by Alice or other family members. I knew Esme would be eager to meet Bella. It was her greatest desire that I find a mate. The front door of the cabin was locked, but I picked the lock and opened the door without damaging it. The cabin had 2 levels, a main floor and a loft overhead. On the wall by the front door was a stove, sink and cabinets overhead, with a refrigerator on the adjacent wall, and a small table. Past the stairs leading to the loft was the living room. The walls were lined with shelves, overflowing with books. There was a large stone fireplace, a well-worn sofa and chair, coffee table, and desk with a computer that faced a window. The place was simple, but I loved it immediately. It was overwhelmed with Bella's scent. As quietly as I could, I walked up the stairs to the loft. My love was sprawled across the bed face down, still wearing her boots and parka. Being near enough to touch her brought peace to my being, but I longed to see her beautiful face. Very carefully, I reached out and turned her over. She remained asleep, but moaned in pleasure at my touch. Seeing how I pleased her, I realized I couldn't anonymously observe. I had to take care of her. I returned downstairs and started a fire. The cabin was cold and Bella needed to be warmed. Back by her side, I very carefully removed her shoes and coat. She was still wearing her clothes and I debated the pros and cons of undressing her without her permission. I was her mate, she would forgive me, but I would also try to be a gentleman. I went to her dresser and picked out a nightgown. I wasn't sure what she wore to bed, but the one in my hands looked comfortable. She was wearing many layers, and I slowly removed her sweater and unbuttoned and slid off her jeans, interpreting the Star-Spangled Banner into Arabic. as to not allow myself to become too aroused by her shape. Reminding myself to be gentleman, I closed my eyes and touched only her undershirt and long johns, and not her body, as I removed them and replaced it with her nightgown. For a moment, I had to step back and catch my breath. I wasn't tempted by her blood at all, but I was tempted by her body. The animal in me urged me to claim what was mine, despite the fact that my love was deeply asleep. I could only imagine the horror and violation she would feel if she awoke to me mounting her. When my arousal was under control, it would never completely pass. Everything about Bella was inciting to me. I tucked her under the covers and kissed her forehead. For the remainder of the evening, I sat by her bed, watching her sleep. It was truly fascinating. When dawn approached, I went downstairs to turn on the kettle, guessing that she'd like a cup of tea later on in the morning. As I added another log to the fire, I heard her gasp. She was awake. With vampire speed, I escaped through the front door, locking it as I closed it silently. I stood on the porch, listening for what would come next. "Calm the fuck down, Bella," she told herself. I laughed at her candor. There were footsteps and then her heartbeat increased dramatically. "Who the hell is here? I will hurt you," she called out. Now it was time for me to use foul language. Fuck. I had taken too many liberties undressing her, tucking her into bed, starting a fire. Of course she would notice and be suspicious. I heard the movement of furniture slam against the front door and I couldn't help but laugh. She was barricading herself. How cute. There was silence for a moment, then I heard water being poured. I was right, she did like tea. Then further silence and then sobbing. It sounded like Bella was crying. How I wished I could hear her thoughts, but I couldn't. Seriously, Bella. You need to get it together, you're falling apart. I was filled with remorse. My desire to take care of her had overcome my common sense and hurt her in the process. Instead of making her feel loved, I made her feel frightened. When Bella finished crying, she seemed to fall asleep. A few hours later, when she awoke, she laughed, and I was relieved that she felt better. I moved from the porch to the trees surrounding the one window in her living room. Although I wasn't near enough to touch her, I felt considerably calmed in seeing her face. I watched as she moved her furniture back into place, then waited until she returned, with her hair in a ponytail and a change of clothes. She sat at her desk for hours, which gave me a clear view of her face. Sometimes she looked out the window and I wondered if she knew I was watching her. I wondered if she was thinking of me, as I was obsessing over her. Bella did not leave her house at all on Saturday, and I remained outside, guarding, protecting, wanting her, waiting for her. In the evening, when she fell asleep, my desire to be near her overcame rational thought, and I broke into her cabin, again, and went to her bedside to watch her sleep. The next morning, I left before she awoke, but remained outside, in the trees, listening to her movements. I was mesmerized and completely enamored, definitely in my own world. By the time I noticed their scents, Emmett and Alice were by my side. "You know, you could turn on your phone once in a while," Alice complained. My eyes didn't leave Bella's cabin. "Sorry, I was busy." "I saw what you did, Edward, undressing Bella. Are you crazy? You haven't even talked to her yet?" I turned to look at Alice. "I was a gentleman," I insisted. "What do you mean, gentleman? What did you do, Edward?" Emmett asked. "Did you make a move already? Way to go." "Forget about it," I mumbled, returning my eyes to the cabin. Bella hadn't been near the window in a few hours, but I knew she was awake. "What are you two doing here?" I asked. "We came to meet our new sister," Alice announced. "What are you waiting for? Let's go introduce ourselves." "No," I replied firmly. "We're not going to overwhelm her, okay? I need to take things slowly. She's human. She's fragile." Emmett rolled his eyes. "You don't have to ask her to marry you, bro. Just say hello." I heard the door of the cabin open. Bella was leaving. Emmett and Alice followed me as I followed Bella. She was carrying a large sack and began walking down the lane. "Where is she going?" I asked Alice, who immediately scanned the future. "The laundromat and then grocery store. When she returns home, she'll need help carrying everything." Like a lovesick puppy, I continued to follow Bella and watched her get on a bus. I growled when she went out of my sight. "Grumpy, much?" Emmett remarked. "Let's take your car into town to watch her." Immediately I began to run and Alice and Emmett followed. We jumped into the car and sped into town. Alice gave me directions to where Bella was headed and I parked in front of the laundromat. It had a wall of glass and I would be able to watch her in clear view. A few moments later, Bella walked directly in front of my car. She was listening to music and oblivious to my presence. I gripped a handle, resisting the urge to rip off the door and wrap Bella in my arms. The need to touch her was overwhelming. Not a good idea, Alice advised, seeing my decision. She'll run away screaming. I changed my mind. I would have to be content with watching her from a distance. I rested my chin on the steering wheel and smiled as Bella loaded her clothes into a washing machine, then sat on a bench and read a book. I sort of expected Emmett to make a joke or Alice to insist again that we speak with Bella, but they didn't say anything. They were watching me as I watched Bella, their thoughts kind and slightly amused at seeing their brother in love. Rosalie always thought Edward was gay, but he's not. Amazing. Edward is so different, so at peace, so happy. When Bella finished her laundry and stopped by the grocery store, I became more bold and decided to follow her inside. Emmett and Alice joined me, giggling, their thoughts evolving from kindness to teasing. You know, technically you're stalking your mate. Just talk to her already. Are you shy? I've never seen you act this way before, Edward. Emmett began to suggest pick-up lines. I don't care how many items you've got, baby, I could check you out all day long. Are we in the laxatives aisle? 'Cause the thought of hooking up with you is running through my mind like crazy. I've got some meat here that's best if used by tonight. Baby, you better get out of that express lane, 'cause you're all that in a bag of chips. Eventually, my brother made me laugh, and as I did, he put his arm around shoulders and gave them a squeeze. Welcome to the club, bro. We followed Bella home, and as she struggled with her packages, I nodded to Alice, giving her permission to meet Bella. She clapped in delight and she and Emmett offered their help. Can we help you with that? Bella screamed and dropped her bags. I almost attacked Emmett and Alice for scaring her. Don't panic, Edward. She was just surprised. Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. Hi, I'm Alice. This is my brother Emmett. Hello, she replied. I'm Bella. Are you new in town? Please let me help you with that, Emmett offered. I'll take care of your woman, bro. I growled loud enough for Emmett to hear me, but not Bella. Dude, I didn't mean like that. Relax. This is my new sister. Thanks, Bella replied shyly. Sorry, I whispered, knowing Emmett's vampire hearing would pick it up. I couldn't help my reaction. It's cool. I understand. Yes, our family just moved here from Forks, Washington. Forks? My father lives in Forks? Really? Alice responded. Did you know about this Edward? He's the chief of police I used to visit as a child, but I haven't been back in years. Charlie Swan, right? Emmett asked. Yes, he was a friend of our father. Carlisle, our adopted father, is a doctor and worked at the hospital, Emmett explained. I'll have to tell Char, my dad, that I met you. What's your last name? Cullen, Alice answered, excitement in her eyes. Please tell Charlie we said hello. Can you believe Bella's father is from Forks? All these years we've known the father of your mate? Amazing? I will, Bella replied. We were just going for a walk. Can we walk you to your cabin? How do you know I live in a cabin? Bella was very perceptive, but Alice was good at lying and being evasive, as we all were in our family. There are only cabins on this street. They're really cute, but goodness they look small. Sorry I haven't been feeling well. Thanks for the help, I do appreciate it. My cabin is just down the way. Was Bella sick? Emmett and Alice mirrored my concern. Are you sick, Bella? Alice asked. We could take you to see Carlisle. He's a great doctor. Carlisle was in the wilderness of Denali. He wouldn't be located easily, but we could find him. I would do whatever it took to keep Bella healthy and safe. No, I'm fine. I actually was already planning to go to the health clinic tomorrow. She doesn't smell sick, Alice thought, sniffing the air. Maybe she's just tired. Humans go to doctors for all sorts of reasons. I'm a student at UAF, although I'll be graduating soon. If you have any questions or want a tour around campus, I'd be happy to help, Bella offered. Most humans instinctively distanced themselves from our kind, but Bella was responding with openness and kindness. It was remarkable. Alice clapped her hands. We would love a tour, wouldn't we, Emmett? He nodded. Rosalie, Jasper and Edward would love it, too. Wow, you have a big family. I'm an only child. We're very close, Alice replied. I can't wait for you to meet them. She'll meet Jasper tomorrow. Oh, we're going to be best friends. I'm so excited. What's your phone number? Alice asked, pulling out her cell phone. Bella gave Alice her number, which I memorized instantly, of course. I'm sending you a text message, so you have my number. I'll call you soon. Thanks for helping me. It was really nice to meet you. It was nice to meet you, Bella, Emmett replied. Let's go, Alice. I'm sure Mom and Dad are waiting for us. And by Mom and Dad, I mean Edward. Alice hugged Bella. Bella, we're going to be such good friends, she exclaimed. Emmett laughed. Excuse my sister, she comes on too strong sometimes. It's okay. Bye. Bye, Bella. See you soon, Alice called out. She and Emmett met me in the woods. We love her, Emmett exclaimed, mocking Alice's excited tone of voice. Seriously, we do, he added. She wasn't afraid of us at all. There was even a possibility that she would have invited us into her cabin, but I didn't pursue it because it would drive you crazy that we got to be near her and not you. Alice was sincerely excited, already making plans in her head with Bella slumber parties, shopping, girl talk. Thank you for helping her. First thing in the morning, I'm going to introduce myself, I promise. It pleased me that Alice and Emmett liked Bella and that Bella had responded so openly to them. Can I ask a personal question? Emmett asked. I nodded. He was always straightforward and I liked that about him. Don't take this the wrong way, I don't mean anything by it, but I was wondering, are you tempted by her blood? She is human. Emmett was careful in guarding his thoughts, not betraying how tempted he was by Bella's scent, but I knew his throat burned in thirst. Mine did as well. I shrugged. I don't fully understand it. I'm very aware of her blood. I'm not tempted by it. I don't think I'm capable of hurting her, although. Alice had seen it, but I confessed to Emmett how I had frightened Bella with my acts of service, like undressing her. He laughed at my boldness. Maybe the mate bond supersede my bloodlust. I don't know. I'm still going to be careful around her. Even if I don't drain her, with my strength in one mistake I could break her. Alice paused, searching the future. You won't hurt her, she replied confidently. I smiled. Thanks. I still didn't completely trust myself, though. We chatted a few more minutes, and they left me alone, to continue watching Bella's cabin from the woods. Again, when nighttime fell and Bella went to bed, I went to her side to watch her sleep. Being with her made me truly happy. I didn't know this level of contentment was possible. She was my world. When Bella awoke, I waited outside again, and as she left the house, I followed her to the UAF campus. The 90 minutes she spent inside her class, in a room with no windows, forcing me to wait in the student center, was pure torture. I had to watch her through the thoughts of her classmates, but it wasn't a satisfying view. While I waited, I glared at every human who attempted to look at me. I was not in a good mood. Finally, class was over and I leapt out of my seat to meet Bella in the quad. I decided that I would simply walk up and introduce myself to her. The one thing I knew we shared in common was forks, and I would lead with that. From there I would see what happened, and I would find a way to remain by her side. Nervously, I walked behind her. I yearned to hold her in my arms, and my more animalistic urges wanted me to pin her to the ground and make love to her. I did neither. Suddenly, she began to slip on the ice and I reached out to catch her fall. Thank you. I'm so clumsy. I could not take my hands off her. She turned around. I tried to smile, but her eyes widened in shock. She collapsed in my arms, fainting again. Carlyle told me that humans would react differently to mating than vampires. Bella seemed to not be able to handle the intensity. It made me worried for her. I scooped her up in my arms, despite curious glances, and returned to the student center. I sat on a sofa in the lounge and placed her in my lap. I liked her sitting there, so close to me. It seemed the perfect place for her to be. A couple minutes passed and I felt her heartbeat increase. Bella? I asked. Are you awake? She mumbled, stumbling out of my lap. I had to pull her back before she hit the floor head first, and I held her hand in mine. She didn't pull away. You're still dizzy. Perhaps you should see a doctor. I'm fine. Thank you for your help. You're welcome. I was puzzled at Bella's behavior. I depended heavily on reading the thoughts of others, so I felt uncertain about how to respond since her mind was closed to me. Sitting side by side, it felt like electricity sparking between us where our bodies touched. She wasn't leaving. I took that as a good sign. My name is Edward Cullen, I finally said, breaking the silence. Cullen? Are you? She turned to face me and I copied her actions. She pulled her hand away from mine. Yes, Emmett and Alice are my brother and sister. They told me they met you yesterday. She looked suspicious and I was caught off guard. I awkwardly explained, my years of lying and deceit suddenly vanishing from my mind, as I made up an excuse about how I knew her last name. I hoped it was convincing. I went to the bookstore Saturday, hoping to see you again. When you weren't there, I asked around until someone told me your last name. I wanted to look up your phone number, so I could call you, but you were unlisted. When Alice and Emmett returned home Sunday, they told me they met Charlie Swan's daughter, Bella. Why would you want to call me? She asked, shyly. I was surprised. Couldn't she feel how I desired her? You fainted at the cafe. I wanted to check and see how you were doing. But, you left. Why didn't you wait until I woke up? Would have been easier. Bella wasn't satisfied with my lame excuse. I'm sorry, I had to talk to someone. Please forgive me. I held her hand and squeezed it gently, looking deeply into her eyes. It won't happen again. She shivered, probably due to the nearness of my ice-cold body, and withdrew her hand from mine, for a second time. I missed her touch immediately. Well, I'm fine, she responded. I need to be going now, goodbye. She began to walk away and I chased after her. Where are you going? I have to go to work, she answered, avoiding my eyes. Had I done something wrong? Can I give you a ride? Sorry, I don't accept rides from strangers, she answered politely. I'm a stranger, I replied, deeply hurt at that label. Bella was so familiar to me, she was my other half. How could she not feel that, too? She stopped walking and looked at me with concern. Edward, I just met you, she explained. Her kindness brightened my spirit, and she was looking at me again. Ah, I understand. Can I walk with you? I wasn't going to take no for an answer. It's a free country, she replied, and I couldn't help but laugh. I searched my mind for conversation ideas, but my thoughts were clouded with desire. I stood as closely to her as I could, but kept myself from touching her again. The bookstore was close to campus and we reached it too soon. See you later, she dismissed me and walked into the store. I followed. I watched as she took off her coat, put on her name tag and went to the back office to talk to her boss Maria. It seemed like Bella was trying to ignore me, as she started walking down the aisles, straightening books. What are you doing? I asked. Working, she replied. Can I help? Yes, this was my attempt to flirt. She stopped walking and turned to face me. What are you doing? She asked. I just want to be near you, I replied, feeling incredibly vulnerable, not knowing what I would do if she rejected me. I heard her heart rate increase and I leaned in closer. I don't want to be a stranger, I whispered. I would no longer be restrained. I was going to kiss her. Suddenly, I heard Maria's thoughts. She was coming to talk to Bella. I pulled back, grabbed a book, and pretended to read. Bella, I'm going run a few errands. Annie's in the back and Sarah is upstairs if you needed anything. Okay, hun. Bella stood, a little dazed, my behavior not going unnoticed. Okay, thanks. What's wrong with Bella? She's a good girl, be back soon. I returned to my previous position, but I was too quick. Whoa. How did you move so fast? Was there anything Bella didn't notice? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to frighten you. It's okay, she mumbled. The bell at the door rang, signaling new customers entering the store. Bella left me and I counted to 10, using my years of practice of self-control to keep from following her. I needed to take things slowly. I felt too comfortable around Bella. I would scare her if I didn't take my time. I didn't leave, however. I grabbed a book and pretended to read, all the while watching Bella from the corner of my eye and through the thoughts of her customers. When I heard her taking the back staircase, I followed her to the cafe on the second floor. I allowed her time to sit down and then I went to her. She was reading a paper. May I join you? She nodded and I sat down. How do you like Fairbanks? We asked each other at exactly the same time. We both laughed. Sorry, you first, she insisted. I'm happy to be here, I answered honestly. Happy to be here with her, and you? I really like it here. It's so different from where I grew up, but it suits me. I like the peace and quiet. Where did you grow up? Phoenix. Warm, hot, sunny, desert of a place. Where are you from? I didn't want to lie to her. I was born in Chicago. My family just moved here from Forks, but you already know that. She smiled at me for the first time since I'd met her, and it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Such a small world. You know, I considered finishing high school in Forks, but decided to graduate a year early in Phoenix, instead. I think we might have been classmates, if I had chosen to live with my dad. But, we meet here in Fairbanks. How crazy is that? We were destined to meet, I replied. She blushed and I was aroused. Please eat, I urged, trying to distract myself by remembering her needs. Even if it's just a salad, you need your strength. I like salad, she replied, taking a big bite. I smiled. She was feisty. I liked that. Aren't you hungry? She asked. Bella noticed everything. I need to think of an excuse about my suspicious habits. I'm fine. So, tell me more about graduating from high school early. Why did you decide to do that? Bella was the most fascinating person in the world to me. As we talked, I learned more about her life and personality. She was extremely intelligent, a hard worker, independent. I could listen to her for days and never be bored. As we talked, it was as if the world faded away. It was just the two of us and no one else. Unfortunately, Sarah, the cafe manager, broke the spell, telling us she was closing the shop. I have to get back to work, Bella gasped, picking up her tray and heading towards the kitchen. Suddenly, we weren't in our own little world anymore and Bella was back to acting indifferent about me. It was nice to talk to you. See you around. My mouth dropped open in shock. That was it? See you around? Sarah teased Bella, her thoughts revealing that her open and talkative behavior with me was unusual. I took that as an encouragement. She teased Bella about being in love and Bella responded with saying Maria was going to kill her. It happened in a split second. My entire being tensed and I began to shake in anger at the mere mention of Bella being threatened. I raced to the back staircase to protect Bella and find out who her enemy was and destroy them immediately. What are you? Who is going to kill you? I asked, grabbing her by the shoulders. What? You heard that? Edward, it's a figure of speech. My boss is going to be upset with me. That's all I meant. My vampire brain was able to process several pieces of information at once. I quickly realized my animalistic tendencies had overcome rational thought for a moment. My reaction frightened me. Bella was using a figure of speech. What if she actually was in danger? I would kill to protect her in a split second, without any regard for the consequences. Pain ripped through me, as I considered Bella being in danger. Please don't talk like that, I pleaded. If someone tried to hurt you, I would kill them. But, I couldn't tell Bella that. She might not react well. Maria, Bella's boss, entered the room. Bella, are you all right? She asked. Who is your friend? The woman was impressed with my good looks and excited to see Bella with a male companion. This is Edward. I was just showing him where I worked. Edward, this is the general manager, Maria. It's nice to meet you, I greeted. Nice to meet you, Edward. She looked at Bella. Bella has a boyfriend. So cute. It explains where she disappeared to this afternoon. Young love. Maria's thoughts moved to Dave and their intimate moments. Let me show you to the door, Edward, Bella insisted, initiating touch with me for the first time. I instantly relaxed. Well, I have to work now, she explained. Okay, I replied. I wasn't going to leave her, I would wait. Okay, she echoed, seeming to wait for me to say something else, but I wasn't sure what. Goodbye. See you around had been cruel. Goodbye was blasphemous. I never wanted to hear her say that word to me and I never wanted to say that word to her. I'm sorry, but I can't say goodbye to you, I responded. Bella Swan was my mate. I was not going to leave her. Is something wrong? I asked. Edward shook his head. No, nothing is wrong. It's just that, as I said before, I want to be near you. My stomach flipped over, a blush spreading across my face. I was embarrassed at my reaction, but delighted at his words. His phone buzzed and he quickly looked at it. Alice wants to visit the store. Do you mind if I wait for her? I shook my head, reminding myself to breathe. Edward smiled. I'll be in the music section, he whispered, walking backwards, holding my gaze, then turning around gracefully and disappearing behind the stacks. Who was this man? Why was he having this affect on me? Why did he want to be near me? I glanced in the direction of the music section, but couldn't spot Edward from where I was sitting. I didn't dare go to him. Maria had been far too kind in not reprimanding me for taking a 2-hour lunch break, especially when my usual break was only 30 minutes. I had been a faithful employee, rarely having a sick day, always on time. I liked my job and wanted to keep it. I didn't want my bosses to think I was suddenly becoming a flake because I met a man. That was too much like Renee and I was not her. My body stiffened, realizing where my thoughts had led. Where did that come from? Too many questions, too many new feelings. I was spiraling. Suddenly, I felt instantly calm. The worry vanished and I felt at peace. Everything will be okay, I told myself. Just enjoy the moment for once. The bell on the door jingled and Alice came skipping through the doorway. "Bella," she exclaimed. "It's so good to see you again." It was hard to not be cheered by her excitement for life. "Hi, Alice," I replied shyly. "It's good to see you, too." Alice met me at the counter, leaning in to whisper, "My brother really likes you, what do you think of him?" He told her about me. I felt ridiculous for even saying this. Is he stalking me? It's not that I would mind being stalked by someone like Edward Cullen, but he was just really, very intense. She laughed, as if it was the funniest thing she heard all year. I warned him to not be too intense, but he wouldn't listen. He's quite captivated with you. Intense is a good word to describe Edward. Is he like this with all the girls he's interested in? I felt like I was making a bold assumption in claiming that he was interested in me. Maybe he wasn't interested in me romantically, but he certainly was giving me a lot of attention. I didn't know how to handle it. Alice stopped laughing and was suddenly serious. "No, Bella. He's not. I've known Edward for many years and he's never reacted to anyone the way he's reacting to you." I swallowed nervously. "Oh," I replied. "He's never had a girlfriend before," she added, correcting what she was originally going to say. Okay, now that was unbelievable. I rolled my eyes and sighed. Gorgeous, godlike Edward had never had a girlfriend? Impossible. I looked at Alice skeptically. "You're telling me that Edward has never dated before? He's perfection. I'm sure he could have any woman he wanted." She smiled mischievously. "You think my brother is perfection?" I blushed. "Obviously, he is very good looking. You're beautiful, too. So is Emmett. I just can't believe Edward has always been single." "It's true, he does have his share of admirers wherever we move, but no one has ever caught his attention like you have. Our family thought he would be alone forever and that's why we're so happy he's found you. Carlisle and our mother Esme can't wait to meet you." I gasped. "Your parents know about me? I just met Edward a few hours ago." "You met him on Friday," she corrected me. "We didn't speak until today." Alice looked uncomfortable, as if she revealed too much. I was beginning to feel very overwhelmed. Alice murmured. I doubted she was ever at a loss for words, until now. The bell rang and a tall, strikingly handsome blonde man walked in and put his arm around Alice's waist. He kissed her on the cheek and she snuggled closer to him. Instantly, I felt relaxed. "Bella, this is Jasper." "Good afternoon, ma'am," he greeted, politely, with a hint of a southern accent. "Hi," I replied. "Darlin', Esme wanted you to pick up a few architecture books for her. Shall we look together?" Alice smiled at me as she allowed Jasper to lead her behind the stacks. "Section 8A, I called out, remembering I was still working. I closed my eyes, rubbing my temples, although I didn't have a headache. I felt calmed again and wondered if my constantly changing emotions would give me whiplash. The calm remained long enough for me to focus on filling out order forms for a list of customers who had requested books, and check out a few who were buying books. Occasionally, Alice would saunter over, asking for my opinion on a book or two. Edward reappeared, sitting in the same chair he had in the morning, reading another book. I expected Edward, Alice and Jasper to eventually become bored and leave the store, but to my surprise they remained until the store closed. Maria joined me at the counter at the same time the Cullens came to purchase the books they had chosen. Maria's eyes widened as she saw the mountain of books. She wasn't a greedy person, but I knew she would be happy at the small fortune the store would earn from this sale. "Our family loves to read," Edward explained to Maria. "Our father, Dr. Cullen, has an extensive library and is always looking for new books to add to his collection." "Well, that's nice," Maria replied. People in Fairbanks were down to earth, not rich or fancy, and anyone who looked at the Cullens could tell they did not belong here. The locals appreciated the tourists who spent their money in town, but they weren't impressed by it. But Edward had a charming way of speaking. It was almost dazzling. Everything about him was impressive, even to an older, experienced woman like Maria, and especially to me. "Please come again, soon," she added, as the Cullens picked up their bags. "Bella, would you like a ride home?" Alice asked, her eyes hopeful. "I have to close up the store, but thanks anyway," I replied instantly, wanting to show Maria the first was serious about my job. "Bella, it's snowing. You'll get home sooner if you don't have to take the bus." "I'll lock up," Maria insisted. "Are you sure?" I asked, uncertainly. "Shoo, girl. I'll see you tomorrow." Okay, thanks, Maria." I took off my name tag, put on my coat and picked up my backpack. Alice linked her arm with mine, and walked me out of the store, followed by Jasper and Edward. The men were so tall, it felt like they were our bodyguards. Earlier in the day I turned down a ride from Edward because he was a stranger. But now I was freely getting into a car with him, Alice and Jasper. I hoped he didn't notice my hypocrisy. It had been a long day, it was cold outside, and I wanted to go home. He seemed happy, though, as he opened the passenger door for me. Jasper and Alice slipped in the backseat. Edward drove. I realized this must be Edward's car. "Nice car," I remarked. I didn't know what kind it was, but it looked expensive and fast. "Thank you," he responded. "Rosalie tuned it this week for me." He revved the engine. "Rosalie? Who was that?" I felt silly for being jealous, but I was. "Rosalie is Emmett's wife," Jasper explained from the backseat. I nodded in acknowledgement. "Oh. Edward, would you mind taking me and Jasper home before you drop off Bella? I promised Esme I would help her with dinner. I don't want her to have to do it alone." Out of the corner of my eye, I could have sworn I saw Edward look back and glare at Alice, but it happened too quickly. He was calmly looking at the road. "Alice, sister dear, Bella has had a long day. She wants to go home. Esme can wait." "Bella, you don't mind, do you?" Alice put her hand on my shoulder and gave it a squeeze. She looked so sad, as if I could grant her a wish that would ease all her sorrows. I had a feeling she always got what she wanted. "Sure, I don't mind," I answered, granting her request. Edward looked apologetic. "I know you don't feel comfortable being alone with me. We're still strangers, as you said earlier today. I'll drop you off first, don't worry." So he did remember. I regretted my words. As I looked at him, I realized I felt safe. I didn't know him as well as I would like, but he wasn't a stranger anymore. "It's okay, Edward. I really don't mind," I assured him. Maybe being alone with Edward was what I needed. Maybe I would start to understand what was happening to me. Edward glanced in the rear-view mirror. I looked over my shoulder and caught Jasper nodding. "Yay," Alice exclaimed. "You can meet Esme and Carlisle." I almost began to panic, but was quickly calmed. Jasper laughed. "Take it slow, darlin'. I know you're excited to be Bella's friend, but she can meet the family later." Alice sighed. "You're right, Jazz. Sorry, Bella." I felt relieved. "I'd love to meet them, Alice. I'm just a bit tired tonight." "We understand," Jasper assured me. Edward glanced over at me, a shy smile on his face. I couldn't help but smile back at him. He was adorable when he looked uncertain and vulnerable. The Cullens lived on their own private estate, many miles outside of town. It was definitely going out of our way to drop Alice and Jasper off first, and as soon as I realized how far we were driving, I realized Alice had planned it this way to give Edward a chance to be alone with me. I would thank her later. After driving down a mile-long driveway, the house came into view. It was more of a chalet or a mountain lodge and opulent luxury compared to the small, dry cabin where I lived. Edward drove around the circular drive, and as promised, I didn't have to go inside. Alice and Jasper said goodbye, gathered their new books from the trunk, then walked into the house. As Edward drove back down the driveway, he held my hand in his, bringing it to his lips for a kiss. "We're finally alone," he whispered. "We're finally alone," Edward whispered, bringing my hand to his lips for a kiss. His cold lips on my skin sent a shiver down my spine. My stomach was filled with butterflies and the normal electricity between us remained, but I wasn't nervous. I felt safe with him. I felt complete. I smiled, but didn't say anything. Edward's eyes returned to the road, but he remained holding my hand, gently massaging my palm with his thumb. The sensation of his touch made me tremble with pleasure. I didn't know hand-holding could feel obscene, but it did. I leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes, trying to understand what I was feeling. During the day with Edward, the first felt a wide range of emotions, but now that it was just the two of us, alone, I felt more what I felt when we locked eyes in the cafe, right before I fainted. I felt like I had always known Edward, that all these years I had been waiting for him to arrive, and now that he had, I felt a deep sense of relief. I never thought I would need anyone. I was always self-sufficient. Usually after hours at work or spending time with acquaintances from school, I was itching to be alone. But I had spent almost all day with Edward, and as we neared my cabin, saying goodbye to him made me anxious. If I asked him to come inside, would he expect something to happen? I never had a boyfriend before, never even kissed a man. Although Alice claimed Edward was just as inexperienced as I was, he definitely looked worldly and experienced. For a brief moment, I wondered if this was some elaborate family seduction to allow Edward take advantage of me. It was definitely working. I glanced at Edward and he looked just as nervous and uncertain as I did. I was going to take the risk. "Would you like to come in?" I asked. Edward's face lit up, as if he was relieved. "Yes," he replied, eagerly. He exited the car, running around to open the passenger's side door for me. Such a gentleman, I noted. We entered the cabin and I turned on the light. My little place felt inferior compared to the mansion he lived in, but Edward seemed fascinated by the cabin. "Would you mind if I made a fire?" he asked. "Please, make yourself at home." Instead of using the logs by the fireplace, he stepped onto the porch and gathered a dozen or so from the reserve pile. "You're strong," I remarked, impressed that he was able to carry so much. Thanks to his help, I wouldn't have to move more logs inside until next week. In one simple gesture, he saved me from a lot of work. Edward smiled at my compliment. As he began to set the fireplace, I decided to take the moment to go to the bathroom. "I'll be right back," I mentioned, turning to go outside. "Where are you going?" he asked, alarmed. I'm going to the bathroom." "Outside?" he asked, incredulously. "This is a dry cabin. I have an outhouse." I wasn't embarrassed by it. A lot of people in Fairbanks lived in dry cabins with outhouses. "I'll go with you," he offered. I shook my head. "I do this all the time. I'll be fine." "But it's dark outside. There could be wild animals." I shrugged. "Like I said, I do this all the time. I've never been eaten by a bear, at least not yet." Edward jumped up and rushed to my side. "Why do you joke about your life like that? It's precious to me." He seemed to have a talent of making me speechless. The look on his face was pure concern, and I didn't understand why my life meant so much to him. "It's this way," I mumbled, walking out of the house. Edward closed the door behind him. "You're not coming inside the outhouse," I warned. "It's not big enough for two people and I need privacy." If Edward Cullen wanted to see me tinkle, he was not the man for me. He laughed. "Of course, Bella, don't be silly. I'll wait outside." I glared at him and closed the outhouse door. If allowed myself to think about it, this was really very embarrassing. When I finished, I walked back into the cabin, refusing to look at Edward. He followed in silence. Once inside, he continued to make a fire, and I washed my hands and put the kettle on to make a cup of tea. The cabin soon became warm, thanks to the fire, and I took off my coat, hanging it up. "Can I take your coat?" I asked. "Thanks," Edward replied, slipping out of his rather thin military-style jacket. I was surprised it kept him warm in this harsh Alaskan winter. Our fingers touched as he handed me his jacket and there was a spark of electricity. He smiled and I blushed. The kettle shrieked and I made a cup of tea for both of us, not knowing whether he would accept it or not, but he did. We sat down on opposite ends of the sofa, which was placed in front of the fireplace. The power flickered and it went out, leaving us to sit in the glow of the fire. It was an incredibly romantic setting, except for the seemingly enormous space between us. "Does the electricity go out often?" Edward asked. "Sometimes, but the community generator usually kicks in right away." As if on cue, the lights came on again. We both smiled. "Why do you live here? Alice told me you're a student at UAF. Why don't you live in the dorm?" I frowned, feeling like I needed to defend my home. "It's not the nicest place, I know, but I like the privacy." "You like to be alone," Edward stated. It wasn't a question. With him, here with me, I suddenly didn't want to be alone anymore. Usually, I do, I replied honestly. And you? He nodded. I spend a great amount of time alone. You see, in my family, I am the odd man out. We have 3 perfectly matched sets of couples and me. Carlisle and Esme Jasper and Alice Emmett and Rosalie. I called out his family members, to see if I remembered their names. Edward smiled. Yes. I love my family. I am very lucky to have them in my life, but sometimes it is lonely being the only single person. He spoke as though he'd spent centuries alone, but he looked as if he were my age or a couple of years older. Wasn't there someone in Forks you were interested in? I asked. Even though Alice told me he had never had a girlfriend, it was still very hard to believe. He shook his head. I've been waiting to meet the right woman. I didn't think I'd ever find her until I met you. As we were talking, we had shifted closer to one another on the sofa. We were now only inches apart. I drank my tea, nervously. May I kiss you? He asked. I nodded shyly, wondering if I would faint for a third time, and impressed at his boldness. Edward sat his tea on the coffee table. He took mine, and placed it as the table as well. Inching even closer, he cupped my face with his hands, and slowly leaned in until his lips met mine. We both felt that familiar electric spark that happened whenever we touched, but instead of jumping apart, we pulled each other closer. It was like a flame had been ignited. He put his arm around my waist and I ran my fingers through his hair, both of us eager and wanting more. My heart began to beat wildly, as Edward pressed me down on the sofa, covering my face with gentle kisses, whispering how beautiful I was. This was too perfect. Edward was too perfect. Maybe I really was hallucinating. I began to cry. Edward stopped kissing me, but didn't move away. He wiped my tears away with his hand. Am I hurting you? He asked, concerned. No, I whimpered. Then, why are you crying, love? Because this can't be real. You're too perfect. I'm afraid I'll wake up in the morning and you'll be gone and I'll be alone again. The words rushed out. I felt incredibly vulnerable, sharing my heart like this. Oh, darling, Edward whispered in response. He leaned back against the sofa, placing me in his lap, cuddling me in his arms. Bella, I'm never going to leave you. I was confused. What do you mean? He stroked my cheek. How can I explain it? Do you believe in love at first sight? No, I answered honestly. That only happens in movies, not in real life. Edward leaned down to kiss me again. It sent shivers of pleasure down my spine. It happened to me, with you, he whispered, his lips a fraction from mine. He kissed me again and I eagerly responded. For several minutes, I was in a daze of passion, as Edward and I enjoyed each other. His kisses were always gentle, full of care and concern, as if he was worshipping me when his lips touched my skin. Instinctively, I attempted to open his mouth with my tongue. He moaned and I felt his body tremble, but he didn't allow it, choosing to move his mouth to kiss my neck. My breathing increased as I began to feel a desire I had never known before. It was powerful. I wanted Edward. However, I wasn't ready to go from my first kiss to making love in one evening. I carefully pushed him back, but laid my head against his chest so he wouldn't see my breaking apart from him as rejection. I needed to slow things down. Edward embraced me with one arm, and with the other, used his hands to massage my neck. It was exactly what I needed to relax. You were my first kiss, I confessed, slightly embarrassed at my inexperience. Even if he had never had an official girlfriend before, he was obviously a very experienced kisser. And he definitely knew how to use his hands. You're my first kiss, too, he responded. I laughed and looked up at him. What? He asked, a small trace of hurt on his face. Did you not like it? Seriously, Edward? You are far too good at kissing for this to be your first time. He smiled, understanding why I laughed. I'm telling you the absolute truth. You are the first woman I've ever kissed, and it was definitely worth waiting for. I felt honored and unworthy. Why did you choose me? Why should I be so lucky to receive the affections of this perfect man? Edward looked me in the eyes, his face filled with confusion, as if I should already know the answer to my question. Because I love you. The first moment I saw you, I knew that you were mine. How can you love me? I protested. You barely know me. I wanted it to be true, but it seemed too good to be true. For people like me, this is how it happens. It's instantaneous and irreversible. It's forever. People like you? I questioned. What did he mean by that? I'll explain one day, but for now I think we need to get you to bed. Edward was so good at distracting me. He lifted me up as if I weighed no more than a feather and carried me in his arms to bed. I didn't know what he expected and I didn't think I would be able to refuse anything he wanted, but I had to muster the courage to tell him I needed to take things slowly. Edward, I've never and I was too embarrassed to talk, afraid to make assumptions, but not wanting to reject him either. Love, I am a gentleman. I want you to sleep, that's all, he spoke gently, rescuing me. Oh, okay. Are you leaving? I asked, suddenly panicked. No, I'm staying here. Good, I sighed in relief. He handed me my nightgown, which was laying on a chair. It was the same one I woke up wearing on Saturday morning, the one I never wore. Would you like to change for bed? I blushed. Did he expect me to change in front of him? It was an incredibly sexy and scary thought. Edward smiled. I'll close my eyes and turn around. I promise I won't peek. I didn't understand why he couldn't go into the living room while I changed, but I didn't want him to leave my side, either. He kept his promise and was a complete gentleman. I quickly changed and scooted under the covers. I'm finished, I announced, and he turned around and joined me in bed but stayed above the covers. I inched over and nestled my back against his chest. He wrapped his arm around my waist, drawing me closer. Our spooning felt very intimate, although the blanket was a barrier from our bodies fully touching. Edward kissed my neck and I shivered. Sweet dreams, my love, he whispered, and I fell fast asleep in his embrace. Did you sleep well? I asked, sitting up in bed, wiping my eyes. Edward was sitting next to me with a smile of contentment on his face. I don't really sleep, he admitted. But watching you is fascinating. He greeted me with a kiss on the cheek, and while I was delighted at his touch, I hoped he hadn't smelled my morning breath. I noticed Edward had changed clothes. Did you leave? I asked, feeling distressed at the idea. No, I had a change of clothes in my car, he explained, understanding why I asked. Oh, that's good, I replied. It was silly for me to be upset that he left me for a moment. At one point we were going to have to be apart. We couldn't be together 24 hours a day, even if I wanted us to be. I had school and a job and I was sure he had things to do. Can I make you breakfast? He asked, his eyes lighting up. He was so excited at the idea of this, it was adorable. I'm really just a cereal kind of girl, I shrugged. He seemed so eager to please me. But you can pour me a bowl, if you like. He smiled and kissed me fully on the lips. It was a good thing he was still only using closed-mouth kisses, otherwise, my breath would have scared him away. Edward jumped off the bed and walked around to my side, offering his hand to help me up. It was a gallant gesture, but unnecessary. However, I couldn't refuse the chance to touch him. His hand was ice cold. I put my other hand on his, trying to warm it up. Your hands are so cold, I said, rubbing my hands against his. I'm cold-blooded, I guess, he joked. He leaned down to try to steal another kiss. My hands flew to cover my mouth. I need to brush my teeth, I explained. He nodded and kissed my hands that were covering my mouth. I blushed at his touch. For someone who was cold-blooded, he sure knew how to make me hot. Okay, he answered. Where is your toothbrush? Did he think he was going to brush my teeth? Maybe I should eat breakfast before I brush my teeth, and maybe we could talk about personal space. Edward nodded. You should get dressed. It's cold and I didn't know if you wanted me to start a fire or not. I smiled at him, glanced at the stairs leading to the living room, and then back at him. I raised my eyebrows. Was he taking the hint? You want me to leave, he stated, looking crestfallen. I want privacy so I can get dressed, I corrected. Oh, I'll turn around, he replied, closing his eyes. I couldn't help but laugh. This man refused to be parted from me, literally. I pushed him out of the bedroom. It'll take 5 minutes. Surely, we can stand to be separated for 5 minutes? Edward cupped my face with his hands. I will never be able to be separated from you, Bella, he whispered with complete seriousness. His breath was sweet and intoxicating. Somehow he had brushed his teeth this morning. Most people didn't smell this good when they first woke up. I swallowed nervously and I frowned. This is a little intense for me, Edward, I admitted. I think we need to talk. He stepped back, but looked like he was in pain. Of course. I'll let you get dressed and I'll wait for you in the living room. Thanks, I whispered, wondering how I could have hurt his feelings so easily. I dressed in my usual layers of clothing, put on my sturdy boots, and pulled my hair back in a ponytail. I rarely wore makeup, but as I looked in the mirror, my eyes were bright and my cheeks had some color, instead of its usual pale complexion. It was probably because I blushed a million times since I met Edward. I looked happy. When I walked into the living room, kitchen area, I noticed Edward had poured me a bowl of cereal. One had been joking about that, but he did it anyway. Sort of endearing. I picked it up, grabbed a spoon, and joined him on the sofa where he was sitting. He looked deep in thought. I started eating my breakfast and we sat in silence until Edward spoke. "Bella, I know that this happening very fast and that I'm probably smothering you with my attention, but I honestly can't help it. When someone like me finds the person they're supposed to spend eternity with, it's a very all-consuming thing. If I can't see your face, my body aches. I'm in pain. I must be near you, my survival depends on it." Most women would swoon at such a declaration, but I had never been normal. I was going to protest. "You just met me, Edward. I don't want to hurt your feelings, but it's difficult for me to understand why you feel so intensely for me." He smiled gently. "You're wonderful, Bella. You're beautiful, kind, smart, compassionate. You're everything I want in a woman. It doesn't matter that I've just met you. You will always be the only woman I want. I love you." I didn't know how to respond. A man I had only officially met 24 hours ago was telling me he loved me. "How do you feel about me?" he asked, shyly. "I can't deny that I feel a strong connection to you. You make me feel safe and I want to get to know you better." I was being cautious. I didn't fully understand what I was feeling. It felt like love, but how could it happen so quickly? Edward looked at the floor and frowned, clearly hurt. "I've overwhelmed you. I apologize." He stood up. "I should go." I stood up with him. "Edward," I whispered, not wanting him to leave, but not knowing what to say to make him stay. He was hurt by me, and I hated to see it. "I don't know how to talk to you without telling you everything. Once I begin, I don't think I'll be able to stop. I fear that you won't accept me and that you'll reject me. I couldn't bear to lose you." "You can talk to me," I insisted. He sighed. "You're not ready. I should have taken things more slowly, been more patient. The fault is mine." Edward searched my eyes, apparently waiting for a sign that did not come. He dropped his gaze and walked toward me, giving me a strong hug. I closed my eyes, inhaling his scent, feeling comforted at his touch. "I'll wait for you," he whispered. "However long it takes, I'll wait." By the time I opened my eyes, he was gone. After Edward left, I cried for a while. I missed him immediately. My entire world changed when I met him and I was running behind my emotions, trying to catch up. Whatever Edward was afraid to talk to me about, I knew it was important. But he was right. I wasn't ready. Only a few days ago I dismissed love, convinced that I would never find it. I swore to myself that I was content with loneliness. Then, Edward miraculously appeared in my life and made me believe love at first sight was possible. Naturally, I freaked out. I was independent and self-sufficient. I was inexperienced. Could I open my heart to love? It would require me to be vulnerable and take risk. Edward seemed like a gift from God, an answer to a prayer I didn't realize I prayed. But, opening my heart to him would mean I would have to depend on him. I only depended on myself. These thoughts were on repeat in my head, and I was so distracted I didn't do any homework. It was my morning off, anyway, so I just sat on the sofa, staring at the empty fireplace. When it was time for me to go to work, I stumbled off to the bus stop, with a frown on my face. I was miserable. When I arrived at bookstore, I went through my usual routine of checking in with Maria for my assignment, working, eating a late lunch at the cafe, then returning to work. Edward was the only thing I could think of: his face, his touch, his words. I hoped he would make an appearance, to ease my suffering, but he didn't. When my shift was over, I was the last one to leave, locking up the store, then walking slowly to the bus stop. I felt as though someone had punched me in the stomach. It was a horrible feeling. Was I lovesick? I barely slept at all that night, tossing and turning, feeling nauseous. I kept checking my cell phone to see if Edward had called, but he never did. What did he mean by waiting for me? Did he expect me to make the first move? Although I sort of knew where he lived, I didn't even have his phone number. Why was he being so mysterious? All of this felt like it was happening too fast, and yet not fast enough. The next morning, I woke early, deciding to go to campus and try to read there before class. I was too distracted by my thoughts to stay at home to get any work done. As I waited for my bus, A dark Mercedes pulled up to the stop. The window rolled down to reveal the most beautiful woman I had ever seen in my entire life. This woman glared at me. "Get in the car," she demanded. I took a step back. "Excuse me?" "Get in the car." I glanced to my left and right, wondering if I could make a run for it. The driver's side door opened and Emmett got out of the car. "Emmett?" I asked, confused. He looked apologetic and walked over to me. "Sorry, Bella. This is my wife Rosalie." I told her to ask nicely, but she's rather upset. "Why is she upset?" I asked, concerned. "Well, Edward is." My eyes widened. "Is Edward okay? Is he hurt?" I gasped. Emmett shook his head. "He's okay, but we think he needs to see you. Would you mind coming to our house?" Immediately, I got in the car and Emmett and Rosalie drove me to their estate. Emmett seemed to be speaking to Rosalie, but it was so softly I couldn't hear him. He glanced back at me. "When Edward came home yesterday morning, he went straight to his room," Emmett explained. "That's not so unusual. He likes to be by himself, but he absolutely refused to see anyone. And you'll see when you get there." Panic rose within me. I was worried to the point of nauseousness. As soon as I entered the house I heard guttural moaning, as if someone was dying. I looked up at Emmett. "Edward?" I whispered in shock. He nodded. "Alice and Jasper met us at the staircase, and Alice gave me a hug." "Thank you for coming, Bella. Edward has never acted this way before. Carlisle and Esme are out of town and we haven't been able to get in touch with them. We didn't know what to do." Alice was clearly concerned for Edward. Her face looked as worried as mine. "He won't let any of us help him, either," Jasper added. "But we think you'll be able to calm him." I hoped I could help, but I didn't feel very powerful. "His room is on the second floor, first door on the left," Rosalie informed me. She was not very friendly, but I guessed it was because she was worried about her brother. I nodded and the others watched me walk up the stairs. I walked down the hall and slowly opened the door to Edward's room. Edward was curled up on the floor, in the middle of the room. He stopped moaning when I entered the room. I ran to him, collapsed on the floor and began stroking his face. "Edward, Bella. I was waiting for you." He pulled me into his arms, kissed my forehead and I felt his breathing steady. We laid in the floor, face to face, our bodies pressed together. I felt every inch of him and the familiar electricity was comforting. It occurred to me that I might be falling in love with someone who was mentally ill. But, since meeting Edward, I felt mentally ill myself. Were we both crazy in love? After several minutes, there was a knock on the door and Jasper and Alice entered. Edward jumped up, bringing me with him, and stood in front of me. "Mine," he growled. "She's mine." The sound that came from his chest definitely wasn't human. It scared me. Jasper and Alice backed away with their hands up, in submission. Edward continued to growl until they were gone. Then, he swung around, picked me up, and proceeded to jump out of the second-story window and run through the forest. I thought I would have a heart attack, but was too scared to scream. A human couldn't have done what Edward just did. I closed my eyes, feeling his speed in the wind, until we came to an abrupt halt. Edward sank down into the forest floor, leaning against a tree, and placed me in his lap. He began licking my neck, as if I was a cat and he was cleaning me. It brought pleasure, but I found it unusual to say the least. He then buried his face in the crook of my neck and began to purr. Edward was acting more like an animal than a human, but he seemed to be trying to tenderly care for me. Despite the weirdness, I felt incredibly safe and at peace with him. He was obviously distressed, felt threatened, and being with me seemed to calm him down. I rubbed his back. At one point, I fell asleep, only to wake up in the same exact position. It was cold and dark outside and my teeth began to chatter. I was wearing my parka, which kept me warm, but I'd never stayed outside this long before during the winter. Edward wasn't wearing a coat at all, and that alarmed me. "Aren't you cold, Edward?" I whispered. "Let's go back home." "Promise me you won't leave," he begged, kissing my bottom lip. "I promise," I replied immediately. He stood up, gently lifting me with him. "I need to hunt, stay here and don't move." I nodded, confused as to how he was going to hunt without a gun. He kissed me again, leaning me against a tree, pressing his entire body against mine. I craved more, but he broke away and sniffed the air. Whatever he smelled, he seemed to chase the scent. He disappeared and a second later I heard the roar of a bear. I was frozen with fear, but worried for Edward's safety. My heart pounded and I wondered what I could do to help. Was Edward going to die? In that moment of desperation, I realized that I loved Edward. It wasn't rational, I barely knew anything about him, but my soul was bound to his. I couldn't live without him. I heard a tussle in the woods and then silence. I began to cry, thinking I lost my love. Edward, I whimpered. Immediately, he was by my side, as if he appeared out of thin air. I gasped in fright, but threw myself in his arms, clinging to him. You're alive, I cried. He laughed quietly and rubbed my back, in a manner of speaking. Yes, he murmured. I leaned back, to look at his face, to see if he was injured. Are you hurt? I stopped talking and stepped away from him. His face was without a blemish, perfect as always, but blood was dripping from his mouth. Edward, what are you? EPOVI was overwhelmed with emotion as I left Bella's cabin. Although I couldn't read her thoughts, I could see the hesitation and confusion on her face. It cut me like a knife. I had declared my eternal devotion and love for her and she had responded with I want to get to know you better. Immediately, I regretted my declaration. I proclaimed my affection for her too soon. It was all my fault. I overwhelmed her. When Bella insisted I could talk to her, I believed her. But, it was my fear that restrained me. If she was overwhelmed by my feelings, she would be overwhelmed by the truth of what I was. You're not ready. I should have taken things more slowly, been more patient. The fault is mine. I wanted her to protest, insist once again that I could talk to her, but she didn't. So, I left. When I arrived home, Jasper met me at the front door, along with Alice, their thoughts full of concern. Jasper tried to calm me, but I refused. Leave me alone, I growled, glaring at my brother and sister as I passed by. Why are you so upset? Is Bella all right? Jasper imagined Bella being drained by me. I couldn't handle the image and pushed him up against the wall. Alice gasped. Bella is fine, I snarled. I could never do that to her. Although he could have easily defended himself, Jasper allowed me to pin him against the wall. I had never attacked any of my family members this way and he was mentally cataloging my emotions. Hurt, longing, confusion. Your emotions are so strong, Edward. Let me calm you down. I felt a tickle of calm begin to affect me and I backed away. I said leave me alone, I grumbled, running up the stairs to my room, leaving Alice and Jasper to stare at each other in disbelief. I didn't make it any farther than the center of my room before I collapsed into a heap. I remained there for the next 24 hours. Jasper did eventually try to calm me down, at Alice's insistence, but it had little affect. My emotions were too strong and I could not be comforted. Rosalie and Emmett came to my side, but I growled until they retreated. Even though I was clouded by pain and my thoughts of Bella, I didn't ignore the thoughts of my brothers and sisters. I've called Carlisle 64 times, he hasn't responded. He's in the Denali wilderness, there's no cell phone reception there. We could go search for him in Esme. It should take less than a day. What if Edward freaks out and attacks us? Alice, what do you see? Which decision will work the best? I monitored Alice's thoughts as she scanned the options. After a long search, she settled on Bella. Rosalie and Emmett would pick her up, she would come to me, and everything would be okay. Except, my true self would be revealed. If Bella came to my rescue, there would be no going back, all would be revealed. Alice didn't push further into the future, but she liked this alternative. Other decisions led me to continue to lie in agony and lash out in ways I would later regret. Would Bella decide to go with Rosalie and Emmett? The future wasn't set in stone. She had free will. Did she feel the pain of separation as deeply as I did? I doubted it. What was happening to me was indescribable. I couldn't restrain myself from crying out in pain. I felt like I was dying a slow, agonizing death. I knew my survival depended on Bella, but I had told I would wait for her. Wait for what? I didn't know. A realization, an epiphany, an understanding. As a human I knew she wouldn't fully understand what our connection meant, but she had to know it was more than I want to get to know you better. I didn't hold those words against her, but I did want her to surrender to what was happening. Her hesitancy confused me. When I heard Rosalie and Emmett leave the house I decided that I would try to compose myself. I didn't want Bella to see me in such a state of weakness. But, when I tried to stand up, physically I could not move. It scared me. Being without one's mate had the power to incapacitate a strong, immortal vampire. I didn't know such a thing was possible. As soon as I caught Bella's scent in the air, I relaxed, but I could not stop groaning. I needed to feel her touch. She cautiously entered my room, and to my great relief, joined me on the floor. Her heart rate increased, as if she was panicking. When she touched my face, I was immediately at peace. "Edward," she whispered. "Bella, I was waiting for you." My groaning ceased, and I pulled her into my arms and kissed her. Our foreheads and noses touched, as our bodies pressed against one another. It felt as we were wrapped in our own cocoon of electricity. I never wanted to move. Somehow, I was even able to tune out the thoughts of my brothers and sisters in the background. Because of being in this zone of bliss, when there was a knock on the door, I was caught off guard. Something snapped within me and my human characteristics vanished as my vampire instincts took control. No one was going to take Bella from me. I jumped up, bringing Bella with me, and stood in front of her protectively. "Mine. She's mine," I growled, venom dripping from my mouth, until Jasper and Alice retreated. Then, instinct made me take Bella into my arms and flee. I knew Bella's racing heart indicated that she was probably scared, but my mind wasn't able to interpret it into words of comfort. I had an overwhelming instinctive urge to get us to safety. We eventually collapsed on the forest floor. I propped us against a tree, tucking her into my lap, and began to comfort her the only way I seemed to know how. I was still too inhuman to speak. Time passed and I settled myself into the crook of her neck, purring. Very slowly, my humanity began to return, although I felt my vampire instincts ready to take over at a moment's notice. "Aren't you cold, Edward?" Bella chattered. "Let's go back home." "Promise me you won't leave," I whimpered, kissing her bottom lip. I remembered the pain of our separation and it was unbearable. I was a fool to think I could wait for her. I had to have her now. "I promise," she replied immediately. Feeling back in my right mind, I pulled us up. Bella's blood didn't tempt me, but I needed to take precautions. "I need to hunt, stay here and don't move." She nodded and I pressed her against the tree, ravishing her with a kiss. I wanted more, but hunting now would allow me more time with Bella later. I caught the scent of a bear, and took off into the forest. It was an easy kill and I didn't feel like playing with my food. I drained the animal as fast as I could, until I heard Bella call my name. Immediately, I returned to her. "You're alive," she cried, flinging herself into my arms. I couldn't help but laugh at her relief. "In a manner of speaking, yes," I murmured. Bella stepped back, searching my body for harm. "Are you hurt?" When her eyes reached my face, they widened in alarm. "Edward, what are you?" It was time for the truth. However Bella reacted, I would never leave her side again. She deserved an honest explanation. There was no way to hide or lie about my inhuman-like behavior. Nervously, I met her gaze and decided to go for it. "I'm not human, Bella. I'm a vampire." "I'm not human, Bella. I'm a vampire." My eyes widened and my heart rate increased. "Vampire," I repeated in a whisper, slightly confused. Could they really exist? Was Edward crazy? What did I even know about them? They were supernatural, immortal, drank the blood of humans. "Whose blood is that?" I asked, taking a step back, noticing a few drops of blood on Edward's lips. Edward touched his mouth, wiping the blood away. "I feed on the blood of animals, instead of humans. I just drank from a bear." He was watching me carefully, his words gentle. "I would never hurt you, Bella." I took another step back and Edward took a step forward. "Are you afraid of me?" he asked. I blinked, but didn't answer the question. I wasn't afraid of Edward, but I knew he was dangerous. My mind reviewed my experience with him, subtle hints that told me he wasn't crazy. He was telling the truth. Edward was not human. God-like beauty, strength, speed. He never ate or drank or used the bathroom, growling and jumping out of second-story windows. I'd never met anyone like Edward, and now I knew why. But, as I stared at this man, I knew that him being a vampire didn't change how I felt about him. It didn't matter at all. "Tell me what you're thinking, Bella," he urged. As I looked at Edward, I felt safe. The expression on his face was of love and concern. "I'm thinking that this doesn't change how I feel about you," I whispered. Edward was genuinely surprised. "Really?" I stepped closer and wrapped my arms around him. As I laid my head on his chest, I realized I didn't hear a heartbeat. "And how do you feel about me?" he continued, returning the hug. I blushed. "I think I love you, but I don't know why. I just met you." Edward held me a little tighter. "I love you. I know this is happening quickly, but I promise I will explain everything. Will you explain more about being a vampire? It seemed so ridiculous to even say the word, that was even possible. I looked up at Edward and smiled, raising an eyebrow. He mirrored the smile and laughed. You are truly remarkable, Bella Swan. I was convinced that you would run from me screaming and I would have to chase you. But, you're so calm. I thought Jasper would have to help. Jasper? Oh, Edward responded, realizing he said something he shouldn't have. Jasper has a gift of influencing emotions. It's very subtle, but very helpful. He's a vampire, too? Alice, Emmett, Rosalie, everyone? Yes. I have so many questions, I murmured and then shivered, not from Edward's touch, but from the cold. Realizing I was freezing, Edward scooped me into his arms. I will answer all your questions, but let's get you warm first. I buried my face into his chest, the speed of his running making me dizzy. When we arrived back at the estate, Edward used the front door instead of jumping back through the window. I appreciated that. The family was nowhere to be seen, but as we entered Edward's room the fireplace was ablaze and there was a tray with a cup of hot chocolate and bowl of mini marshmallows. Thanks, Alice, Edward called out, barely above a whisper. I looked around but she was not in the room. She can hear me, he explained, with a smile. She must have known we were returning and prepared the fire for you. Normally, I don't use it. And, of course, I don't drink hot chocolate, either. Edward placed me on the ground and unzipped my parka, then wrapped me in an already warmed blanket. I stepped out of my boots. Alice must have put this blanket in the dryer for you, to heat it up. How thoughtful, Edward remarked. That was me. A deep voice called out from down the hall. I jumped back, alarmed. Emmett, Edward laughed. Thank you, I responded, wondering if he could hear me. You're welcome. The deep voice replied. Edward led me to a high-backed leather chair adjacent to the fireplace and pulled me to sit in his lap. He reached to the side table and handed me the cup of hot chocolate, offering marshmallows as well. I drank it in silence, being warmed by the fire, as Edward played with my hair. Curled up next to him, there wasn't anywhere else I wanted to be. You and your family are awfully civilized vampires, I noted. You live in a mansion, have impeccable manners and are attentive and thoughtful to your human friends. I was trying to lighten the mood, show Edward the first wasn't intimidated by who he was. We are unusual for our kind, that is true. Carlyle, our father, for all intents and purposes, wanted to form a family based on bonds of love and commitment to one another. Most vampires are nomads, constantly traveling, searching for blood. We try to maintain a permanent residence and choose to drink from only animals. Tell me more, I urged, sipping on my drink. I suppose I should start from the beginning. For the next several hours, Edward proceeded to tell me his life story, how he met Carlyle, then Esme, his rebellious years, how Rosalie and Emmett joined the family and eventually Jasper and Alice. He told me about their gifts, how he could read minds. Although not mine, Alice could see the future and Jasper could influence emotions. I asked questions and Edward patiently answered them. So now you know all about me, he finished, stroking my cheek. You are amazing, Edward. He smiled. It makes me happy to know that I can be myself with you, that you won't reject me for who I am. Edward was completely relaxed and at peace, the opposite of how I found him this morning. I never wanted to see him such pain again. What happened today? I asked. Why were you so upset? Why did you growl at Jasper and Alice? Why did you run off with me? He kissed my forehead. You've been so patient and understanding. I don't want to scare you. Please tell me, I insisted. Edward sighed and looked a little nervous, but he nodded. When vampires find their mate, it causes a very strong reaction. It's actually a very rare thing and I didn't know if it would ever happen to me. The moment I saw you in the bookstore, I knew you were destined to be mine. It shocked me, actually. I felt my very core transform. I'm your mate? I stammered. Like a soulmate? I don't know if I have a soul, but yes, you're my other half. You're my mate. I knew it immediately, but you fainted and I was afraid I would hurt you. I made sure you were safe and then I went to see Carlyle. For lack of a better phrase, I was freaking out. He gave me advice, but I was anxious to return to you. When I went back to the store, you were gone. I investigated, followed your scent and went to your cabin. I gasped. So you were the one? I thought I was going crazy. You broke into my house? You undressed me? Edward smiled sheepishly. I wanted you to be comfortable. I was a gentleman, I promise. I glared. You better have been. Did you stay the whole night? He nodded. I made a fire to keep you warm, then I sat by your bed, watching you sleep. I'm sorry now that I think of it, it is rather creepy behavior. I raised my eyebrows. Kind of yeah, but, you were trying to take care of me. I was, and when you awoke, I left and waited outside. I thought being able to hear you would be enough, but it was driving me crazy to not be able to see your face. As I told you before, I started to ache for you. It was only relieved when you went to sleep again and I was returned to your side to watch you sleep. On Sunday, Alice and Emmett came to check on me. We followed you to the laundromat and grocery store. When you were walking home, Alice and Emmett insisted on meeting you. So you were stalking me? Technically, yes, he grimaced. Why did you wait until Monday to introduce yourself? I was thinking about you all weekend. I was dreaming of you. You were? I blushed, although I didn't have anything to be embarrassed about. I glanced down at my hands. Yes, I mumbled. Edward kissed me on the cheek. You're adorable. I shivered in pleasure at his touch. Will you answer the question? He smiled. I didn't accept to find a mate, much less a human one. I didn't know how to react, except that I had to be near you. On Tuesday morning, after we spent the night together, I realized you were feeling overwhelmed, and to be honest, I felt the same way. But when I left, I completely disintegrated. I collapsed in my room and was unable to move for 24 hours. I gasped in concern. Edward, I whispered, putting my hand on his face. The idea of him being in pain was unbearable to me. Perhaps only Carlyle can explain why I'm feeling this way, but I can tell you how I feel. I must be with you at all times. My survival depends on it. I delight in taking care of you. I never want us to be separated. Warmth filled my body. It was more than a blush. It was the feeling of being completely loved. I realized Edward was putting into words exactly what I'm feeling for him. It was overwhelming. I buried my face into his chest and started crying. He stiffened for a moment, then relaxed and began rubbing my back. Did I say something wrong? I can't apologize for how I feel. It won't ever change. I leaned back and wiped the tears from my eyes. I didn't want to upset him. No, it's not that. I gasped between sobs. It's that I feel the same way about you. Edward silenced my sobs with a kiss on the lips. It was tender, but passionate. I eagerly responded. Although I don't know how much time passed, it was as though no one else existed. It was much like our first evening together, our first kiss, a very powerful magnetism between us. The more I kissed him, the more my desire for him grew. But, although Edward seemed as eager as I was, he was subtly restrained. I leaned back. What's wrong? I asked. He leaned in, trying to steal another kiss. Nothing is wrong. I put a finger on his lips. Edward, he sighed and sat back, but pulled me with him. If our chests weren't pressed together, neither of us felt completely comfortable. You notice everything, don't you? I smiled. Not everything, but it seems like something is bothering you. I frowned, realizing what it could be. Am I not a good kisser? I'm sorry if I'm doing it wrong. Edward shook his head and interrupted me. Love, you are perfect. It's not that at all. It's that I have to be careful with you. Your blood doesn't tempt me, but if I don't control myself, my strength could hurt you, even kill you. Also, he looked embarrassed, which didn't seem natural for him. My mouth is full of venom. I can't kiss you how I want to kiss you because of that. Oh, I replied, simply, realizing the complications of being in love with someone of another species. So it will always be this way? It made me sad and frustrated to think that our relationship wouldn't be able to progress to more. Edward had awakened something in me, and now I wasn't sure if it would ever be satisfied. Edward's eyes looked troubled, but also hopeful. Let's take one day at a time, shall we? One day at a time. Time. My eyes widened and I jumped off Edward's lap, stumbling until he steadied me. What time is it? I asked in a panic. Edward glanced at a clock. 6:30. You haven't eaten all day. I should get you dinner. 6:30. I have to go. I missed my class this morning and never showed up for work. When I was with Edward, the world disappeared. How could I be so irresponsible? Why do you have to go? Edward asked, looking hurt and confused. I have to get to the bookstore. I'm about 6 hours late for work. I searched around the room for my backpack, which I quickly realized I left in the car in which Rosalie and Emmett picked me up. I would need to call Maria and apologize profusely and tell her I would be there to close the store tonight. Hopefully, she wouldn't fire me. You don't have to work, Bella. I'll take care of you. What? I stopped panicking and looked directly at Edward. My family is very wealthy. Money is not an issue for us, and now it's not an issue for you. I rolled my eyes and shook my head. Don't be silly, I'm not going to take your money. My money is your money, Edward insisted. You don't need a job anymore. I knew Edward was being honest about his wealth. It was apparent by the Cullen mansion. I'd never seen anything so luxurious, especially in Alaska. And I knew that I was connected to Edward in an eternal love kind of way that I didn't completely understand, but I couldn't believe he was trying to give me money. It was almost offensive. Are you serious? Edward nodded his head. There was no way I could accept his offer. Although I liked working in a bookstore, it was still work. Part of me would love to be independently wealthy and not have to work. But that was the thing, I was independent. I'd always earned my own money, paid my own way. It didn't matter if Edward was my other half, I was still going to take care of myself. I'm not quitting my job, I spoke firmly. Edward looked as though he was listening to something, a sound wave that I couldn't hear. His eyes returned to me and he smiled faintly. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. I want you to do what makes you happy. Immediately, my growing anger subsided. I briefly wondered if it was Jasper influencing my mood or whether Edward himself was having this affect on me. I would be happy if I had my backpack, I replied. My phone is in it and I need to call the bookstore. I think I left it in the car. Of course, Edward dutifully nodded and held my hand. Let's go get it. He led me out of his bedroom and down the stairs. When we reached the bottom, Alice and Jasper appeared, holding my backpack. Edward gripped my hand tightly and stepped in front of me, as if to protect me. His stance was rigid. Edward! Alice shrieked. We're not going to hurt Bella. I felt a wave of relaxation and yawned. Alice, maybe we should give them their space. Here's your backpack, Bella. Jasper cautiously set my backpack on the ground and then pulled Alice away. They retreated much like they had done earlier in the day, their hands up, not turning their back to Edward. What was that about? I asked, suddenly worried now that Alice and Jasper were out of view. Were they going to hurt me? Edward did not turn around. He was still guarding me. Just give me a moment, please, while I calm down. I was more than confused by Edward's actions. At least this time he didn't take me in his arms and start running. Alice and Jasper were his family members. If Edward felt threatened by them, how much more would he feel threatened by Maria or Dave or complete strangers in Fairbanks? I waited a moment, then slowly inched towards my backpack to pick it up. It was hard to search for my phone with only one free hand, but as I tried to let go of Edward's hand, he wouldn't release it. Let's go into the living room, he suggested calmly, still in deep concentration. I nodded and he led me into the next room, sitting on a sofa and pulling me into his lap. I wondered if he would ever allow me to sit by myself again. Since I was in his lap, Edward released my hand, and I reached for my phone and quickly dialed the bookstore. Maria answered on the third ring. Hi, this is Bella. I'm so sorry I didn't come into work today. A friend needed my help and I completely lost track of time. A friend? Edward whispered with a grin. I held a finger to my lips to tell him to be quiet. You've always called before if you were going to be late. We thought something happened to you. Maria's voice was tense. She seemed concerned, but also annoyed. I can be there in a half hour and stay until closing. I am so sorry. This won't happen again. All right. Maria sighed. I'll see you soon. Okay, thank you. Goodbye. Click. The line went dead. Maria was angry. I looked at Edward with a worried look. I can talk to her, he offered. Smooth things over. I shook my head. It's okay. She'll get over it. But, I need to go now. Do you think Rosalie or Emmett will drive me back into town? Edward looked genuinely offended. Rosalie or Emmett? I shrugged. They drove me here, I just thought. When I said earlier that I must be with you at all times, that I never want us to be separated, I meant it. I know this will make your life more complicated and probably annoy you, but I'm not going to leave you. Yes, that would make my solitary life more complicated, but I didn't want to be without him, either. Practically, I didn't know how that would work out, though. What happened just now with Alice and Jasper? I asked, changing the subject. Were they going to hurt me or were you just worried they would? I'm sorry about that, I honestly don't understand why I reacted that way. I feel very protective of you. Rationally, I know I can trust my family, but instinctually, I'm on guard. How are you going to act when I'm at the bookstore? Are you going to growl at Maria? Edward smiled. Maybe. My mouth dropped open and he continued. I'm kidding. I can control myself. I'll be good, I promise. I responded, not knowing what to say, my mind reeling from the revelations I received during the last several hours. I began to feel tired and hungry, but I needed to go to work. Will you drive me to work, then? He smiled again, as if that request delighted him more than anything in the world. Your wish is my command. I stood up, feeling impatient and anxious. I'll go get my coat. It was still in Edward's bedroom. We'll go get your coat, Edward corrected. Oh dear. What had I gotten myself into? Once we arrived at the bookstore, Edward insisted on talking to Maria. She seemed suspicious at first, but by the end of the conversation she was blushing and laughing. She even gave me a hug before she left for the evening. Edward knew exactly what she wanted to hear and all was forgiven. I was impressed, even though it had been obvious manipulation. Doesn't hurt to have a mind reader as a soulmate, huh? Edward asked smugly, once Maria was gone. I rolled my eyes, not knowing whether he was seriously that arrogant or just being sarcastic. Are you sure you can't read my mind? I asked. It would be mortifying if he knew what I was thinking. Of all the people in the world, I wish I could read your mind, but it is a mystery to me. It's incredibly frustrating. I smiled. Edward looked annoyed and I knew he was telling the truth. At least I had some privacy, since he was refusing to leave me alone. It wasn't that I wanted Edward to leave. On some level, I wanted to be with him just as much as he wanted to be with me. I felt the connection, but that didn't make it any less strange. At one point Edward followed me to the bathroom again, although he remained outside the door. A few customers came and went. Edward sat in a chair, reading a book, but his body language was tense whenever anyone was near or talked to me. No one was trying to hurt me, no men were flirting with me. I didn't understand why he seemed to be so possessive and literally refused to let me out of his sight. Would he insist on coming to work with me every day? Maybe it would be easier if I quit my job, I thought. Edward was trying really hard to give me space to work, but it was obviously uncomfortable for him. But I couldn't just quit my job for a man. That was something my mother Renee would do and I wasn't like her. I was different. I was independent, I was. Bella, it's 9:15 p.m. Isn't it time to close the store? Edward interrupted my worried thoughts. I blushed. Thank you. I was lost in thought. For a moment, Edward looked concerned, but I avoided his gaze and went to check if the back door was locked and turn off the lights. Surprisingly, Edward didn't follow me, but he remained at the door, holding my coat and backpack until I returned. Being a gentleman, he helped me put on my coat and held my bag for me while I locked the front door of the bookstore. He opened the passenger side door of his car for me, closed it, and then got in himself. Sorry it's so cold. I'm going to get a car that has automatic ignition, to warm it up for you before we have to drive anywhere. I've lived in Alaska for 3 years, I'm used to the cold, I replied dismissively. Edward shrugged, but I noticed the flash of hurt in his eyes. I reached out to hold his hand. It is really thoughtful, though, for you to think of that. Thank you. He smiled and my heart fluttered. Edward was dazzling. He leaned over to kiss me and when our lips met I realized how much I missed his touch. But, I refrained myself from attacking him in the car. Suddenly, I felt a little shy and insecure. I couldn't believe he wanted to be with me. It didn't seem real. It's nice to have a ride home and not have to take the bus, I remarked, feeling thankful for Edward's kindness. You won't ever have to take the bus again, Edward replied happily, squeezing my hand. I smiled, but inside I began to panic. What if I wanted to take the bus? Would he let me? I had never been in a relationship before and didn't know what the rules were when you were part of a couple. Renee and Phil had a pleasant relationship, but she did whatever he wanted. If Edward and I were now together, what did that mean practically? Did I have to ask his permission? We weren't married. I think you worry too much, Edward remarked quietly. I glanced over at him. You can read my thoughts? You said you couldn't? He grinned. No, I can't read your mind, but I have spent a lot of time watching you. When you get distracted by your thoughts, your forehead wrinkles up. I relaxed. Oh, sorry. You don't have to apologize. I just want you to know that I'm here for you if you need to talk." Edward's sincerity made my heart melt and I thought I would cry. I never had anyone to talk to. Partly, that was my own fault. I was an introverted workaholic that avoided people. But it felt very nice to not be alone anymore, to have someone there for me if I needed it. "Thank you," I replied, but a yawn escaped with it. I was tired and ready to go home. I noticed we were heading the opposite direction of my house. "You missed the turn. My cabin is on Gold Hill Road." As a vampire, I knew he had a photographic memory. It occurred to me he hadn't forgotten. He was intentionally taking me somewhere other than home. "I thought we'd stay at my house tonight," Edward told me. "It's much warmer and you'll be more comfortable there." I was outraged. How dare he make a decision without talking to me, try to tell me what to do? Maybe that was how it worked in a couple, but it wasn't going to work with me. "Take me home," I replied icily, removing my hand from Edward's and shifted my body towards the door and away from him. Noticing my tone of voice and change in body language, Edward immediately responded, making a U-turn in the middle of the empty road. "Okay." When we arrived at my cabin, I didn't wait for Edward to open the car door for me. I jumped out and stomped to the front door. As I unlocked the door, I glanced back and noticed Edward wasn't with me. He was standing by his car with his arms folded, an unreadable expression on his face. Suddenly, I felt very silly for being so upset. "Aren't you coming in?" I asked quietly, too low for him to hear me. Apparently he did because within a second, he was by side. I gasped and jumped back in fright. He leaned his forehead against mine. "Sorry, I'll try to move at human speed from now on. I just feel so comfortable with you, it's too easy to be myself." Comforted by his touch, I was no longer alarmed. "I want you to be yourself with me." Edward replied with a kiss and I felt my entire body turn to jelly, but at least I didn't faint. He pulled me inside and closed the door, while we continued to kiss, then set me on the sofa. When he broke away to start a fire, I grabbed onto his jacket and pulled him closer to me. "Love, you'll freeze to death if I don't start a fire," he whispered between kisses. I whimpered in protest. My body was on fire with desire. I would hardly freeze to death. Still, he insisted we stop for a moment, although it only took a few seconds for him to put logs into the fireplace and light a match before he returned to my side. Suddenly, it made sense why Edward wanted us to spend the night at his house, instead of my dry, unheated cabin. Edward's touch was making me hot, but his lips and body were cold. Instead of being controlling, maybe Edward had only been looking out for my well-being. I felt even more silly for being upset. I should have talked to him about it instead of immediately insisting he take me home. It seems I had a lot to learn about being in a relationship. "Where were we?" Edward asked, leaning in again to continue ravishing me with kisses. I sighed and inched closer to him. Despite the limitations of closed-mouth kisses, it was still extremely pleasurable being this close to Edward. He also began to cautiously use his hands, running his fingers through my hair, putting his hands under my shirt to hold my waist. He lifted me up and placed me on his lap. I straddled him, and he cupped my bottom with his hands to draw me closer to him. I'd never been this close to a man, in this way, and I wasn't sure if it was what I thought it was, but I felt his erection and it surprised me. Edward was a vampire, but he was also very much a man at this moment. The heat, excitement and pleasure was almost too much to bear. Was it this intense for every couple? I was experiencing firsthand what it meant to be all hot and bothered. We continued to enjoy one another for a while, until I felt Edward become rigid. "What's wrong?" I whispered, burrowing my face into the crook of his neck. He smelled so good. "I'm enjoying this too much," he replied seriously. "I'm afraid if we keep this up, I won't be able to stop." "What if I don't want you to stop?" I asked, surprised at my boldness. "I'm not human, Bella. I could hurt you. I would hurt you. I'm so sorry." I leaned back to look into his eyes. He was truly conflicted and the frustration I felt at not being satisfied disappeared and was replaced with compassion. I stroked his cheek. "It's all right," I whispered, unstraddling myself. He stretched out his arm and I curled up next to him, putting my head on his chest and arm around his waist. We were still touching, but the distance allowed enough space for us to both calm down. Without even realizing it, my eyes closed and I fell fast asleep. When I awoke to the smell of breakfast, I was in my pajamas, in my bed. I glanced at the clock. It was still early and it was Thursday. No class this morning, I was due to work at the bookstore at 11:30 a.m. Edward was in the kitchen, putting eggs, bacon and toast on a plate. Since he didn't eat food, I knew it was for me. And I was suddenly starving, not having ate it all the day before. I glared suspiciously at Edward. "What?" he asked, confused. "You changed my clothes again," I pointed out, looking down at my pajamas. At least it was the pair I usually wore, not the nightgown he seemed to prefer. He grinned. "I didn't look, I promise. Maybe I felt a little, but I was a gentleman." He winked and I rolled my eyes. "Breakfast for the human. It smells awful. I hope my cooking isn't awful as well." I whipped the sleep from my eyes and yawned. It was extremely thoughtful of Edward to make breakfast for me. "You didn't have to do this," I insisted, as I sat down at the table and picked up a fork. "You don't like people taking care of you," Edward stated. It wasn't a question. I shrugged. "I guess it makes me a little uncomfortable," I admitted. "I've always taken care of myself. But, thank you. I do appreciate it." I smiled and reached out to touch his hand. He returned the smile, but it was cautious. "Will you let me take care of you or will you always resist?" "Can't we take care of each other?" I offered. Edward's smile widened. "This is new for both of us. I know my overprotectiveness is annoying you and you're used to being completely independent. Not to mention the fact that we come from different backgrounds." "Vampire human," I clarified. He nodded. "Vampire, human. We finally found each other. We're together now. But, we have to figure out how it's going to work with our differences." I was glad he brought up the subject first. The practicalities of our relationship was what worried me most. The mystery of it all and our connection didn't seem to bother me so much, although I did have questions about it. "I'm sorry about last night, for making a decision by myself first to return to my house. I should have talked to you first." I sighed. "And I'm sorry for reacting so immaturely. I should have talked to you, too." He smiled and seemed relieved. We're both learning what it means to be part of a couple. It was surprising how much Edward and I thought alike, without even knowing it. It was good to know we were struggling with the same issues and coming to the same conclusions. We just needed to talk to each other about it. "Are we going to get married?" I blurted out impulsively. Edward grinned. "Are you proposing to me, Bella Swan?" I blushed. No, 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 no." The force of my words seemed to offend Edward. He looked crestfallen. I tried to explain. "I'm not interested in getting married, don't worry about that. I was just wondering how to define our relationship. Yesterday you said I was your mate. To be honest, I don't really know what that means or what expectations that holds. Would the human equivalent be marriage?" Practicalities. I was always interested in practicalities. Humans divorce and remarry. When a vampire finds his or her mate, it's a permanent thing. Eternal. I will never love anyone else, but you. I blushed again at this confession of commitment over breakfast. Edward spoke so confidently and so matter of fact. "What if I do something you don't like? Or you get to know me and find out how boring I really am? What I feel for you is unconditional, Bella. I'll always love you and you'll always be the most fascinating creature to me. We'll be together for eternity." Eternity? The look of alarm on Edward's face revealed that he said too much. "It's something we should discuss, but not now. I think it's too soon." "You're immortal," I reminded myself. He told me yesterday during our long conversation, but it hadn't clicked until now. Edward would never die, but I would. Edward knelt by my side, putting a hand on my thigh and one behind my back. "You're worried. That's why I think we should put this conversation on hold." "It worries me too, but we don't have to deal with this now. We have time." I trusted his judgment. I didn't like to think about unpleasant things anyway. Being separated from Edward, even by death of old age, made me nauseated to think about. Suddenly, I wasn't so hungry. I stood up. "I should get dressed." "You haven't finished your breakfast," Edward protested. Oh, for his benefit, I sat back down and finished eating. He had gone to all the trouble of making it for me and it would be rude to not eat it. And I also didn't want him to know how worried I was about our eventual separation, even if it would be happening in 50+ years. While I ate, Edward typed furiously on his phone, either texting or emailing someone. Noticing my curiosity, he explained. "I'm asking Carlisle for a couple of favors. It's a surprise." He winked at me. To my surprise, Edward didn't follow me to the bedroom while I changed, but remained downstairs to clean up the kitchen. We were making progress. Although, when I finished dressing I found myself rushing downstairs to see him again. How could I miss him so much even though it was only 5 minutes of not seeing his face? I leapt into his arms and he hugged me, seeming to miss me as much as I missed him. We were both ridiculous. Edward did follow me to the outhouse, which was just as embarrassing as the first time he did it because now I knew about his enhanced vampiric skills. He couldn't read my mind, but he could hear everything. I tried not to think about it, and when I finished, I refused to look at him until we were back inside the cabin, and I washed my hands. He sat down on the sofa and held out his arms, beckoning me to him. I desperately wanted to join him, sit and cuddle with him all day, but I had responsibilities. I have homework, I explained apologetically. I was also working on a novel, which I hadn't touched in days, after writing it obsessively for years. The idea of sharing it with Edward embarrassed me. It was too personal. What if he didn't like it?
Edward wasn't fazed. He stood up. Do you need to sit at your desk?
No, it's just reading. I actually have a test tomorrow, but it's all essay. Where do you usually read? On the sofa. Edward smiled and sat back down. I went to my desk and picked up the textbook, a thick anthology, and walked over to the sofa. I sat on the end, away from Edward. You're going to distract me. I need to concentrate, I explained. He wasn't offended, but nodded with a grin. I understand. I looked at him. I would be reading for a couple of hours. He would get bored sitting there, waiting for me. I didn't want him to leave, either. Would you like a book to read? We could read together. I stood up and walked over to my wall of books. I like that idea, Edward replied, following me. What's your favorite book? I picked up a worn edition of Wuthering Heights. Old school, I know, but it's irresistible. Edward was standing behind me and he kissed my neck. You're irresistible. I shivered in pleasure. Edward, I have to focus. I turned around and shoved the book in his hand. If you want to read something else, help yourself. I have a couple of new biographies I got from the library. You haven't kissed me this morning, he pointed out, pressing my body lightly against the bookcase. I placed my hands on his biceps. Edward, I cautioned, but I didn't try to move. Just one kiss and I'll wait patiently until you have time to give me another one. How could I refuse him? I smiled and he leaned down and gently pressed his lips against mine. Every time we kissed it was like time stood still. The electricity, his scent, the intimacy, my heart beat wildly and I almost fainted. Edward caught me, but pulled away. I instinctively tried to kiss him again, but he put his finger against my lips. One kiss, he admonished. You have homework. I groaned. You're such a tease. Edward laughed to himself, as I grabbed his hand and led him back to the sofa. This time I didn't try to sit away from him. I stretched out on the sofa and snuggled up against him. Thankfully, his presence brought me comfort instead of distraction. I was able to fully concentrate and comprehend what I was reading. By the time I needed to leave for work, I felt confident I would do well on my exam. I should read with you more often, it felt so productive. I'm glad. It's time for work, I presume. I nodded. What are we going to do? You'll be so bored if you have to sit there waiting for me for 8 or 9 hours. Plus, I don't think Dave or Maria would like my boyfriend hanging around the store, either. So, I'm your boyfriend, he responded playfully. I blushed. Aren't you? I thought I was a little more than that, he replied, taking a strand of my hair and playing with it. I don't think most humans would understand the concept of a mate, I pointed out. Edward looked at me, suddenly serious. But, you do, don't you, Bella?
His intensity surprised me. Yes, I swallowed, although it felt a bit untruthful. I had a feeling I didn't understand it the way Edward did.
You're right. Boyfriend, he spoke the word with distaste, will have to do for now. Shall I drive my girlfriend to work? I laughed and rolled my eyes. Yes, please. Thank you. Always the gentleman, Edward helped me into my coat. I locked the cabin door and began walking to Edward's car, but noticed it was already running. How did you do that? I asked in astonishment. He shrugged. I'm fast. On the drive to work I realized we never finished our conversation about what Edward would do while I was at work. I couldn't imagine he would leave me alone, and to be honest, I didn't want him to. But, I didn't want to upset my boss, either. Edward was smiling as he drove, all confidence and contentment. Instead of worrying about it, I decided to relax and see what would happen. Thankfully, I was a few minutes early. I hoped Maria noticed and was still in a forgiving mood. Dave was at the counter, back from his trip, talking to a few customers. I hung up my jacket, clocked in and put on my name tag. When Dave noticed me and Edward, he nodded and smiled, as if he was impressed. He quickly excused himself from the customers and came to talk to us. "Hello, Bella. Edward, it's nice to finally meet you." How did Dave know about Edward? I guessed Maria told him how I blew off work to spend time with Edward. "I'm sorry about yesterday, Dave. It won't happen again," I apologized. Dave waved his hand. "Don't worry about it. I know you're very busy. Whenever you can make it, we'd be glad for you to help. But, you don't have to follow the schedule anymore." My mouth dropped open. He sounded sincere, but his words seemed passive-aggressive, which was completely unlike Dave. "Are you firing me?" I squeaked out. Dave's eyes widened and he glanced at Edward. "Of course not," he stammered. "I just wanted you to know you can work when you feel like it. You don't have a schedule anymore." I felt Edward tense and I looked at him, staring at Dave. The bookstore owner looked at Edward once again and swallowed nervously. "I should get back to the customers. It was nice to meet you, Edward. Bella, Maria has your assignments for the day." He quickly rushed off. "That was weird," I remarked to Edward. "Bella, don't be mad," he began. "What did you do?" I asked, noticing the guilty look on his face. "This morning, I asked Carlisle for a favor. I asked him to smooth things over with Dave so that I would be more welcome here while you worked, so you wouldn't get in trouble." I gasped. "My family is very wealthy. My money is your money." Edward Cullen. "Did you buy the bookstore?" EPOV. Edward Cullen. "Did you buy the bookstore?" Damn. My love was perceptive, but not entirely accurate. "No, I didn't buy the bookstore. My family made a generous purchase of books and are contracted to do so every month for the next 2 years." Bella's heart was pounding and blood was rushing to her face. She was so angry she was shaking. "How much did you spend?" she asked, her jaw tense. I sighed, feeling extremely nervous. "Money isn't an issue for us. It wasn't that much." "How much?" she hissed. $500,000. Bella's mouth dropped open and she squeaked. Before she could tell me to go away, I continued speaking. "The books are being donated to local elementary schools, libraries and the children's hospital. I thought it would be a way to help others, but also allow me to spend time at the bookstore with you." Dave couldn't object if I was a generous customer. She seemed to calm down slightly, but was still glaring at me. Bella blinked several times, then shut her eyes. She rubbed her temples as if she had a headache. "Edward, this is too much. This makes me so uncomfortable." I wished I was able to read her mind, although her body language and words were communicating loudly enough. Dave and a few customers had noticed the intensity of the conversation, but not the words. Bella's heartbeat was slower, but still unusually fast. I didn't want her to faint. I reached out for her hand and led her to a more secluded section of the store, away from curious human ears. "There's nothing I wouldn't do for us to be together, Bella," I spoke, trying to calm her down. "I love you. Please don't be mad at me." I squeezed her hand and looked deeply into her eyes. "Did you tell Dave to cut my hours?" she asked quietly. "No," I responded with force. "That was his own decision. I promise I didn't even mention you. Maria told him about you and me and it was completely his own idea." I was actually incredibly annoyed he had cut Bella's hours. I knew from reading his thoughts he believed he was being helpful, even rewarding Bella for bringing that kind of business his way. But the contract was supposed to be confidential. I was going to tell Bella eventually, but not immediately. Thankfully, she was quickly calming down. "Was this the surprise you mentioned earlier?" "Yes." "What other surprises do you have?" "What do you mean?" "I know you, Edward, even if I just met you. Did you make an arrangement at UAF? Are you suddenly enrolled in my class?" I couldn't help but smile, even if I was in trouble. Although Bella didn't understand it, she did feel our made connection. She seemed to know what I was thinking without even realizing it. "I'm auditing American Renaissance. Not required to do homework or take exams, but able to attend class. There are only 4 weeks left in the semester. A little late, don't you think?" I felt a tinge of rejection, even though I knew it was ridiculous. "Do you not want me with you?" Bella sighed and leaned her head against my chest. "What am I going to do with you, Edward?" I wrapped my arms around her. "You're not getting rid of me, that's for sure." $500,000? Really? I'm sure you could have just asked Dave if you could volunteer. I was trying to impress you, I admitted. I thought it would be a romantic gesture. You love books. She groaned and leaned back to look at me. Romantic gestures are flowers or a love letter, not spending $500,000 to hang out with me. I plan on doing those things, too, I replied. No more surprises. Can you promise me that? I shifted uncomfortably. Okay, but I do have to confess one more thing. Her eyes widened. What is it? We donated the books to local charities in your name. Each book will have a sticker that says, "Donated by Isabella Swan." Bella cringed. Edward, you don't like the attention. She didn't have to say it. I already knew. No, I don't. Not at all. I'm sorry. The first shipment hasn't arrived yet. I'll make the donations completely anonymous. She breathed a sigh of relief. Thank you. For a few seconds Bella was silent, deep in thought. I waited anxiously for her to speak. I suppose I should work now, even though I could go on vacation if I felt like it. I was glad she brought up the subject. During the evening, while she was sleeping, I had an idea. But, even though I made a mistake about the surprises, I was actually planning on talking to Bella about this one. Speaking of vacation, next week is Thanksgiving. Do you have plans? She shook her head. My class is canceled Monday and I have the rest of the week off. Dave is also closing the store for the long weekend because he goes to Anchorage to visit family. I was going to be bold. Hopefully, she wouldn't protest too much. Would you be open to the idea of the two of us going away together? Bella's heartbeat increased. I took this as a good sign. She raised her eyebrows. Away together? We could leave to spend the week at my family's cabin in Denali. I know the perfect spot to watch the northern lights. We could spend time alone together. Bella blushed and shifted her gaze. It hadn't occurred to me that she may want to spend the holiday with her friends or family. She hadn't mentioned anyone, though, since we met. A vacation sounds nice, she agreed, acting casual, but her heart was still pounding. I expected her to refuse, but she was being reasonable. I kissed her on the cheek, trying to calm her down, but it only seemed to make Bella more flustered. Can we leave after your class on Friday, or do you want to stay and work? I whispered in her ear. Our faces were only an inch apart. We can leave after my exam. I'll let Dave know. I leaned in to kiss Bella on the lips, wishing desperately that I could deepen it. Bella's blood didn't tempt me, but my mouth was a pool of venom, with razor-sharp teeth. It wasn't safe to kiss her the way I desired. She sighed in contentment and opened her mouth, but I moved to kissing her neck. When Bella clung to me, I heard Maria thinking about Bella. I squeezed Bella gently with a hug, then separated us. Maria is looking for you, I panted. Touching Bella, being close to her in any way, affected me deeply. I couldn't wait to have an entire week alone with her, without responsibilities and distractions. Bella was trembling and almost looked like she was going to collapse. Are you all right, love? I asked, full of concern. The hospital was only 2 miles away. Carlisle could examine her. I'm fine, she insisted, straightening up. I'll go find Maria before she finds us. With that, she half stumbled away, and I waited a couple seconds before following her, although I was instantly picking up others' thoughts to monitor her every move. I went to sit in my usual spot, in a seat in the middle of the store that gave me a good view of Bella wherever she was working. I was getting better at controlling my body language, but it was increasingly difficult to be in public with Bella. I felt protective to the point of murder if someone even remotely thought of her in any way at all. The night before I charmed Maria, but I had also been completely on guard. With Dave, I knew he thought of Bella as a daughter, but I was also on guard, tense. Rationally, I knew these people wouldn't harm Bella, but being in public at all was a risk. Bella was human, she was fragile. Anything could happen. My instincts told me to grab Bella and run for safety. I hadn't seen my family in a few days. From their text messages I knew Carlisle and Esme were anxious to meet Bella. My brothers and sisters left messages as well, and half a dozen emails, wanting to know how things were going, when I would bring her home, etc. I ignored them all since I was so wrapped up with Bella. Thankfully, they hadn't made any unexpected personal appearances. It was probably due to Carlisle insisting they give me my personal space. I knew it was hard for them to not be involved, since we were always so involved in one another's lives and I had been the only single family member for several decades. When I contacted Carlisle earlier that morning, he was thrilled to hear from me and eager to take care of those favors. My cell phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. A text message from Carlisle. Arrangements have been made with the bookstore and university. Will you bring Bella home tonight? Keeping an eye on Bella and monitoring her from others' thoughts, I replied to Carlisle. Thank you. No, we're staying at her place. Tomorrow I'm taking her to our cabin in Denali for the Thanksgiving holiday week. Is that all right with you? I knew I didn't need to ask permission, but I wanted to honor my father's leadership of our family. Of course. When will we meet Bella? Esme can barely contain her excitement. I didn't want to admit my fears to Carlisle, but I was apprehensive about bringing Bella around the family. After Bella refused to go to my house last night, worry ran wild. With my increasing feeling of protectiveness, along with my reaction to Jasper and Alice being around Bella, I no longer thought it was a good idea to be near my family. If any of them had a hint of a thought about desiring her blood, I feared I would attack. Perhaps if I spent more time with her, and practiced being with her around humans, I wouldn't feel so irrational. Soon. If Bella agrees, we can spend Christmas together. Wonderful. I'll let Esme know. The others will be thrilled as well. Have a good time in Denali. Let us know if you need anything. Thank you, Carlisle. Bella had a late lunch in the cafe and I pretended to eat as well. All of the bookstore staff were excited to see Bella with a man, a rich man no less, and were watching our every move. Bella looked confused as she watched me eat, until I opened the napkin I was holding where I was depositing food after wiping my mouth between bites. She rolled her eyes and glanced towards the counter, immediately understanding the reason for my behavior. Bella waved at her coworkers, who replied with embarrassment and thoughts of being caught, and they scattered. It wasn't very busy at the bookstore, and when Dave offered to close the store and let Bella leave early, she didn't fight it. From my observations and reading the thoughts of Dave and Maria, Bella seemed to have workaholic tendencies. I was happy that she was agreeing to go home early, even if it was just a simple gesture, because that meant Bella was learning to not push herself so hard. She looked tired when we arrived at her cabin, and I was reminded of how exhausted humans could become. As an immortal with no need for sleep, the concept of rest was remote and vague. I should have been more attentive. I was convinced more than ever that going away for the week would be good for Bella. She could rest and maybe even have fun. If you don't mind, I think I'd like to go straight to bed. I need to get up early to go over my notes for my exam tomorrow. Bella yawned and stretched her arms. Of course, I replied, as I finished lighting the fire. To my delight, Bella took my hand and led me up the stairs to her bedroom loft. She was taking the initiative, wanting me to be with her, just as much as I wanted to be with her, and that pleased me. Although it took a lot of self-restraint, I turned around and averted my gaze as she changed into her pajamas. When she finished, she grabbed my hand and pulled me into bed with her. You don't want to brush your teeth or face your face? I asked. No, I'm too lazy. Let's just sleep, she mumbled, snuggling up to me. I quickly placed a thick blanket between us so that my cold body wouldn't make Bella freeze. She had shown amazing tolerance to my icy touch, but I wanted her to be as comfortable as possible. You sleep, I'll watch, I corrected. I love you, she whispered. Warmth filled my body, which I didn't think was possible. This was the first time Bella had said these words to me. It didn't matter that she seemed half asleep at this confession. She told me she loved me. Bella inched closer, entwining her legs with mine, so that she was almost laying completely on top of me. Every inch of our bodies were touching. I love you, too, I replied, kissing her forehead. I wanted to do so much more, show her my love for her in more ways, chaste kisses. Control, 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 I repeated as my instincts battled within me. As Bella drifted to sleep, I was filled with a feeling of bliss. But, with Bella, worry was never far from my mind. She seemed unusually tired, and suddenly so. And she was being affectionate and almost clingy. Her heartbeat had been a roller coaster the entire day, fast and slow, almost to the point that I expected her to faint. She left work early. Was Bella sick? So that's for today, guys. If I got 500 plus views and 15 plus comments, I'll upload another part of same story. Thanks for watching and supporting us. Don't forget to drop your reviews and new story ideas in comment section.